My name is Delilah Mae Bennett, and I'm 72 years old. I was born in a house with no central heat, married a man who thought stargazing was a reasonable first date, and raised 3 children in a town where everyone knows your business before you do. I've survived cancer, a house fire, and a highway pile up in the middle of a snowstorm. I've buried my parents, my best friend, and just last month, my husband of 41 years, Dr. Thomas Bennett. But I never expected to survive being erased. It started on a Thursday. That kind of day in early spring when the sun pretends to warm you, but the wind bites through your coat like a bad memory. I wore black. Not for mourning, though that would have been fair, but because I knew Cassandra would notice. Cassandra always notices when you don't play the part. She was already at the law office when I arrived, standing at the head of the conference table like a CEO, clipboard in hand, her nails the same shade of pink as the lipstick she wore to Thomas's memorial. Nothing about her looked out of place. She looked curated, that's the word, as if grief were an accessory and she'd just matched it to her shoes. The lawyer, a thin man named Dorsey, nodded at me once before reading from the will. I didn't catch all the legal jargon. I didn't need to. The only thing I heard clearly was this. Per the final revision of the estate documents, Delilah Mae Bennett will not be receiving any assets or property belonging to the late Dr. Thomas Bennett. The room didn't react. No gasps. No shifting in seats. Just the scratch of Cassandra's pen on a legal pad. I didn't say a word. Didn't ask for clarification. Didn't ask why. Because somewhere between the word, final, and my name, my body went cold. Not angry. Not sad, just cold. Like the kind of cold you get in a hospital hallway when someone walks in and says, "You might want to sit down." When the meeting ended, Cassandra walked over and handed me a small square box. "Tom wanted you to have this," she said, her voice wrapped in a ribbon of insincerity. Inside, a tarnished silver tie pin, not one of his favorites, not even one I recognized. No note, no meaning, just a thing. Something she could say was from him, even though she knew I'd see right through it. I closed the box and nodded. Not a thank you, just acknowledgement. The kind you give a cashier when they bag your groceries wrong, but you're too tired to care. That night, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea that went cold in my hands. The light above the sink flickered like it always did, and Thomas's cane was still leaning by the back door, where we left it after his last appointment. I could feel him in the walls, in the creak of the floorboard beneath the stove, in the faint smell of cedarwood from the closet where he kept his scarves. And yet somehow, I was the one who didn't belong. The next day, the house was filled with folding chairs, paper cups, and that oddly sterile scent of lilies from the memorial service. Everyone had left. Not a single soul stayed to help clean. Not one person asked if I had a ride home, though they all knew I lived here. Cassandra had organized every moment, down to the font on the slideshow and the flavor of the coffee. It had been efficient, polished, loveless. Thomas would have hated it. He used to say, "A good funeral should end with someone crying in the yard and someone else making drinks in the kitchen." But this was a staged production. No mess, no spilled wine, no emotion, just a spreadsheet of sadness, balanced and reconciled. I stood alone in the garden long after everyone had gone. The air was still, the chairs damp from the morning dew, and a plastic plate of forgotten potato salad sat perched on a brick wall like an afterthought. I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to be edited out of your own story. I walked back inside, and there she was, Cassandra, gathering legal folders from the dining room table as if they were coupons. She didn't look up when I entered, just said flatly, "We'll be moving forward with the asset transfers next week. The lawyer has everything in place." That was it. No invitation for discussion. No question of my opinion. Not even the courtesy of pretending to care. And what could I say? I was the woman who had spoon-fed Thomas applesauce at 3 a.m., who washed his hair when he couldn't lift his arms, who changed the sheets 3 times in one night, when the chemo left him soaked in sweat. I was the woman who whispered to him when he no longer had the strength to whisper back, and I had been replaced by a spreadsheet. That night, something broke loose inside me. Not loudly, not angrily, just quietly. Like a page being torn from a book you loved. You know it's gone. You know it matters. But no one else notices until the ending doesn't make sense anymore. I didn't sleep. I sat in his study, staring at the chair he used to sit in when reading articles, or checking weather reports he already knew by heart. And then, almost by instinct, I opened the drawer on the left side of his desk. It squeaked like always. He used to say, "I should oil that." I always said, "Don't. It lets me know you're home." Inside were receipts, old photos, and a manila folder with no label. It felt heavy. I'll tell you what was inside in part 2. But I'll tell you this much now: Cassandra thought the silver tie pin was the end of my story. But what Thomas left me in that drawer, that was only the beginning. I didn't open the folder right away. It sat on the desk like a stone. Something heavy, immovable, not meant to be touched until you were ready to face the cold beneath it. I made myself a cup of tea, reheated it twice, and still never took a sip. I watched the shadows on the wall stretch longer as the sun sank behind the oak trees Thomas had planted back in '87. He loved those trees. Called them his bookends to time. That was the kind of man he was: quiet, reflective, a scientist with the soul of a poet, and yet, he let this happen. That thought rattled around in my chest like marbles in a tin. I couldn't stop it. He let them cut me out. But then again, maybe he didn't. I opened the manila folder. There were 3 pages. The first one handwritten, faint but unmistakably his. His cursive had always leaned slightly forward, like it was in a hurry to say something important. "Cassandra wants me to update the will," it began. "She says it's for legal clarity. She's being careful. Too careful. She's drawing up drafts without asking. I haven't signed anything yet. I haven't told Delilah. I know she'll ask the questions I'm not ready to answer." I read those lines over and over until the ink blurred. That was his voice. Not the man who had seemed distant in those final weeks, tired and placid. This was the man who still thought for himself, still wondered, still knew when something felt wrong. The second page was a photocopy of a will, familiar, with my name in it. "In the event of my passing, I leave all personal assets, including our shared residence, accounts, and medical foundation shares, to my wife, Delilah Bennett." The sentence had been crossed out. In the margins, "Discuss with Cassandra." And that's when the cold returned. Not the chill of grief, but something else. The kind that warns you you're not just mourning someone, you're unraveling a plan. The third page was a calendar, a list of legal meetings, call times, file reviews. 2 of the meetings had occurred during weeks when Thomas had been hospitalized, hooked to IVs, barely speaking. And I had been there the whole time, except for 2 evenings when Cassandra insisted she give me a break, and sat with him instead. I remember now. She brought him takeout that night. I thought she was trying to bond. I'd even thanked her. But maybe she hadn't come to visit. Maybe she'd come to sign something. I spent the next morning walking the neighborhood. Not for clarity, just to feel like I still existed outside someone else's paperwork. The neighbors waved politely, not knowing anything was wrong. Mrs. Langston handed me banana bread, her version of condolences. Mr. Boyd asked how the foundation was doing. He didn't know I'd been pushed out. That was the most shocking thing. No one knew. Cassandra had erased me from the legal documents, but not from public perception. That would come later. Quietly, once the dust settled and she had reshaped the story. That's what made me angriest. It wasn't just theft. It was a rebranding of my entire life. I had helped Thomas build the Bennett Medical Foundation from a 3-person research project into a nationally respected cancer research trust. I had planned every fundraiser, every donor dinner, every volunteer gala. And now I was nothing more than a widow with no stake in the legacy she helped create. That afternoon, I drove to the foundation office. It was the first time I'd walked in since Thomas's funeral. The receptionist blinked when she saw me. "Mrs. Bennett, we weren't expecting." "I'm just here to check on the archive boxes," I said, calm as glass. She hesitated. "Cassandra said those would be." "I know what she said," I replied. "I started this place with Thomas. I'm not here to interfere, just to collect a few things he left in his desk." That was only half true. I didn't know what I was looking for, only that I had to look. I walked the halls slowly, feeling the weight of every plaque, every framed newspaper article with our names on it, until I reached his office. The door was unlocked, empty, almost sterile. The air inside smelled like lemon cleaner and erasure. His desk was gone. In its place, a conference table. I didn't cry. I just stood there for a long time, thinking of all the nights he worked late, how I used to bring him thermoses of tomato soup, and sit on the edge of the couch, while he muttered about grant reports. Then I noticed it. Tucked behind the bookshelf beneath an old file cabinet was a box. A small one, labeled in Thomas's handwriting. Dell Private. I didn't open it there. I took it home. Inside the box were pieces of him. Not legal ones, not notarized or witnessed, just truths. A birthday card he never gave me, a keychain from our honeymoon in Oregon, a USB drive, and a note. Dell, if you're reading this, I've either been too weak to say it or too late to stop it. But I know Cassandra has plans. I can't prove everything yet, but I've started gathering things. I trust you to finish what I started. Not out of revenge, but to protect what we built. Love always. Tom. I clutched the note to my chest like it was a second heartbeat. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about legacy. About not letting the version of Thomas that Cassandra was trying to manufacture become the only one that survived. About proving that love leaves a longer mark than greed ever can. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Thomas's reading chair. The old brown one with the uneven legs he never let me fix. Wrapped in his flannel robe, clutching the box like a lifeline. I thought of all the nights I had sat here over the years, watching him fall asleep mid-sentence, the book slipping from his hands, glasses half, dangling on his nose. I used to tease him about it. He'd always say, if the story's good, I dream the ending. But now the ending had been taken from me, from us. And I wasn't going to let Cassandra rewrite it. The next morning, I called Thomas Callahan, an old friend from Thomas's early research years. A man whose moral compass had always been stubbornly upright. He was one of the few people who never fell under Cassandra's spell. He answered on the second ring. Delilah, he said, and paused. I was hoping I'd hear from you. I found something. I told him. I need someone who remembers the truth. We agreed to meet the next day at a quiet diner just off Route 16. The kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like the 80s. When I arrived, he was already there, nursing a cup, looking like he hadn't aged a day since Thomas's retirement party. I slid into the booth, pulled out the folder and the small USB, and pushed them across the table. He didn't speak for a long while. Just read. His jaw tightened with every page. When he reached the note, the one from Thomas, he leaned back and folded his hands. This isn't just suspicion, he said finally. This is the beginning of something bigger. You sure you want to go down this road, Dee? I don't want to, I said, but I think I have to. Over the next 2 weeks, Thomas and I worked quietly. No loud accusations, no confrontations. We started with the USB drive. Inside were spreadsheets, drafts of emails, a few recorded memos from Thomas, dictated when his hands were too weak to type. One file was labeled, "If it goes wrong." It contained an inventory of assets, share allocations, even annotated notes about Cassandra's strategic interest in updating the board structure of the foundation. He had started documenting everything. He just didn't get the chance to finish. One night, I sat on the porch with a notebook in my lap, trying to list everything I remembered from the last 6 months of Thomas's life. Every odd meeting. Every time Cassandra insisted on handling something, to make it easier on us. I remembered the legal assistant she brought over one evening to have some paperwork signed. She introduced her as family consultant. I hadn't questioned it. I was so tired, so focused on Thomas's breathing, his appetite, his lab results, I didn't see it. That's how they get you, isn't it? Not with force. With timing. Thomas made another call. To Ava Kimball, a former notary who had worked with Thomas and Cassandra during the Foundation's policy revisions. She agreed to meet us in secret. We met in the back room of the town library, where the musty smell of old pages felt more honest than any courtroom. Ava was young, sharp, nervous. She told us that 6 weeks before Thomas passed, she was asked to witness signatures on routine documents. But something felt off. There was no review process, she said. No formal presentation. Just a signature page and a lot of pressure. She had recorded a note in her planner that night. 7:43 p.m. signature witnessed, no patient present. Her hands shook as she handed us the planner. I never saw Dr. Bennett that evening, she said. Just Cassandra. And her assistant. Thomas Callahan looked at me across the table. We didn't need to say anything. We had enough to move forward. By the time spring began to stretch its arms across the hills of Vermont, we had built a quiet, careful case. We brought in Lydia Moreno, a probate attorney with a steel spine and a reputation for integrity. She read through our materials, paced the room, and then looked at me and said, "This isn't just a dispute over a will. This is potentially fraud and coercion." But she didn't rush. Neither did we. We filed for access logs to the Foundation's legal server. We submitted a formal request for the digital timestamps of the signed documents. We traced who was in the building during the weekend Cassandra claimed Thomas signed the final version of the will. The results. Thomas hadn't entered the building that entire week. But the documents were digitally signed, with someone logged in under his credentials. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just folded my hands and whispered, "I'm still here, Tom. I see what they tried to do. But I'm still here." The next day, a letter arrived in the mail. Thick cream paper, gold lettering, no stamp, someone had hand-delivered it. Inside, an invitation. A celebration of legacy, honoring the life and impact of Dr. Thomas Bennett. Hosted by Cassandra Bennett, formal attire, cocktails, and silent auction, to benefit the Bennett Foundation. I nearly laughed. They had turned my husband's death into a fundraising gala. I placed the card on the kitchen table and stared at it for an hour. I didn't know if I should go. But then I remembered something Thomas once told me. Silence is only graceful when it's a choice. This time, I chose not to be silent. I arrived 15 minutes early. Not out of nerves, but because I wanted to watch them see me first. The country club parking lot was already half full. I recognized many of the names on the valet signs. Board members, donors, faculty from Thomas's old university. People I had cooked for, laughed with, hosted in our garden every 4th of July. People who had once called me Dee and kissed both cheeks like we were old European friends. But tonight I was no one. I wore navy slacks, a silk blouse Thomas had given me on our 30th anniversary, and his old oak tree lapel pin, a gift from his first research grant. No necklace, no lipstick. Just deliberate dignity. The ballroom was glowing. Glass chandeliers, orchestral strings, waiters floating with trays of champagne. On the far wall, a massive photo of Thomas, blown up in black and white. He looked tired in that photo. It was one Cassandra had taken during his last public appearance. Of course, she chose that one. She stood at the center of the room in an emerald dress, speaking to a circle of donors. Polished, radiant. If grief was a performance, she deserved a standing ovation. Her eyes flicked toward me when I entered, only for a second. Then, nothing. No greeting, no gesture, just removal. But I didn't come to make a scene. I came to witness. I wandered the room, stopping at a long table labeled Thomas Bennett's favorite things. There was the mug he used for cocoa, his grandfather's compass, and a first edition copy of Leaves of Grass, the one I gave him the day he opened the foundation. No mention of me, not in the label, not in the auction description. Just the book, like it fell from the sky. A former colleague approached me then, Dr. Raymond Krill. Gray mustache, still wore his wedding ring even after his wife passed. He smiled warmly. "Delilah," he said, "are you still managing the foundation's investments?" I blinked. "I'm not involved anymore." His smile faltered. Ah, I hadn't heard. Cassandra said, "Well." He trailed off. That was it. That one moment told me everything I needed to know. Cassandra hadn't just removed me from the will. She had been quietly deleting me from the memory. I stayed 20 minutes longer. Long enough to hear the opening speech, where she referred to the future of the foundation, and how Thomas believed in progress through bold decisions. Not a single mention of his wife, of our life, of 41 years spent building something with our bare hands. When the applause ended, I slipped out a side door. No one noticed. No one stopped me. But in the car, as I sat staring at the steering wheel, one sentence crystallized in my mind. She started this before he was even gone. The next morning, I met Thomas Callahan and Lydia Moreno in her office. I came armed with notes. Pages and pages of overheard conversations, names. Suspicious donors Cassandra had spoken with that night, phrases she'd repeated that sounded rehearsed. Lydia reads silently, her pen tapping slowly on her notepad. When she reached the end, she looked up at me and said, "This is no longer just about probate. This smells like premeditation." We agreed it was time. That afternoon, Lydia filed a formal challenge to the will, citing undue influence, breach of fiduciary duty, and possible fraud. It wasn't a lawsuit yet, but it cracked the door open wide enough for us to start pulling threads. And what unraveled was worse than I imagined. 2 days later, a letter arrived from Cassandra's lawyer. It was curt, elegant, arrogant. It claimed I was interfering with a lawful transition of estate, that I was grieving, confused, and emotionally compromised. They gave me 10 business days to withdraw the challenge or face public consequences. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it next to my morning tea. Later that night, Lydia submitted our formal rebuttal. Included in it, Ava's signed and notarized testimony, security logs showing Thomas hadn't accessed the office, a digital trail proving someone else logged in as him, the original draft and, most importantly, his handwritten note to me. We didn't shout. We didn't accuse. We simply laid the truth on the table and waited to see who had the courage to look at it. The silence that followed our filing was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. No reply from Cassandra. No new letters, no press releases. Just waiting. I went about my days like normal. Or, at least, as normal as a woman who's been stripped of her legacy can manage. I replanted the dahlias. I took long walks through the park where Thomas once proposed. I drank coffee with neighbors who had no idea their condolences were 5 weeks too late. And every night, I returned to Thomas's study. Sometimes I lit the fireplace. Sometimes I just sat in the dark and whispered things I never got to say, both sweet and bitter. But every night, without fail, I whispered one promise. I'll finish what you started, Tom. I'll make sure they know who you really were, and who I still am. Then, on a gray Sunday afternoon, Lydia called. Her voice was steady, but there was something in it. Something quiet and sure. She's stepping down, Lydia said. From everything. Cassandra had issued a formal statement to preserve the integrity of the Bennett Foundation and honor Dr. Bennett's vision. I have chosen to resign from my role as executor, financial officer, and public liaison. No apology, no admission of guilt, just retreat. I didn't smile, I didn't cheer. That wasn't the point. I simply walked out onto the porch in Thomas's coat and stood beneath the bare trees. The wind was sharp, honest. That same week, the foundation released a new public structure, a temporary leadership committee, names I recognized, people who had stood by Thomas since the beginning, and for the first time since the funeral. My name was listed, not in bold letters, not with fanfare. Just co-founder, that was enough. Lydia asked if I wanted to pursue damages, take Cassandra to court, hold her accountable in a way that would cost more than just reputation. I looked at the files. At the months of research, the sleepless nights, the fear I had swallowed like stones in my throat. And I shook my head. This was never about revenge, I said. It was about being seen. That evening, I went through Thomas's things one last time. In the drawer, beneath a stack of sketches he'd made of our first office space, I found a sealed envelope with no name. Inside was a copy of a will, dated 2 years before the final one. In the margins, his handwriting curved like breath. If anything happens, let her carry this forward. Not because of law, but because she was the one beside me even when no one else stayed. No witness, no notary. Just love. Spring came slow that year. The daffodils bloomed late. But when they did, they broke through the thaw like survivors, stubborn and golden. The foundation reopened its mentorship program, one that Thomas and I had created over kitchen conversations and ink-stained notebooks. No media coverage, no gala. Just quiet work, steady hands. At the annual donors' luncheon, a young board member, barely 30, took the podium. She spoke about vision, about legacy, about the roots beneath the branches. Then, without looking at her notes, she said my name. Thank you, Mrs. Bennett, for holding steady through the storm. And for the first time in nearly a year, the room turned toward me, not out of pity, not out of spectacle, but out of respect. I stood, not for applause, but for peace. That night, I brewed a fresh pot of tea, sat by the window, let the last light stretch across the hardwood like a memory that refused to fade. I didn't burn anything down. I didn't scream. I didn't break. I simply refused to disappear. And in doing so, I wrote the ending with my own hand, in my own voice, on my own terms. Sometimes the deepest betrayal isn't loud. It's quiet. It comes in silence, in signatures, in the way your name disappears from the story you helped write. But dignity isn't granted by others. It's claimed from within. Delilah didn't fight to be included in a will. She fought to be remembered truthfully. To protect the truth not just of a man's legacy, but of a life lived side by side. And in doing so, she taught us this: you don't need to shout to be strong. You just need to refuse to vanish. I thought it was over. When Cassandra stepped down, when the Foundation reinstated my name. When the silence returned, I truly thought that was the end of the battle. But I should have known better, because when someone tries to erase you once, they rarely stop at just one page. And sometimes, the next chapter doesn't start with lawyers or lies. It starts with a knock at your door. It was late April when I heard it. A soft rap, barely audible, like someone unsure if they even wanted to be let in. I opened the door and there she was, the last person I expected to see standing on my porch. Madeline Grace Bennett, 19 years old, hair longer than I remembered, eyes like her father's, Thomas Jr., except less guarded. Her coat was too thin for the weather, and she held a small duffel bag like it was all she had left in the world. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 years. Not because of a fight. Because of a wall that got built over time. By her parents, by distance, by assumptions neither of us corrected. "Hi, Grandma," she said, her voice thin. "Can I come in?" I didn't ask questions. Not right away. I just stepped aside, took her bag, and made tea. The kind with honey and lemon she used to like as a child. Back when she spent weekends here. Back when we planted marigolds together and she called Thomas Grandpop Tea. She looked around the house like it was a museum of her own childhood. Equal parts wonder and loss. "I'm sorry I didn't come to the service," she said after a long silence. I nodded. He'd still be glad to see you now. That was the truth. Thomas had always believed people come back when they're ready, not when we expect them to. Madeline took a deep breath. "I know what they did to you," she said softly. "I know what Aunt Cassandra pulled off. My dad, he didn't want me to know, but I heard things. Then I saw your name in the Foundation press release, and I figured if even half the stories were true, you might be the only one who'd tell me what really happened." I leaned forward, gently. "Why now?" She hesitated. "Because I found something," she whispered. "In Cassandra's old office. Before she left, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Her hands trembled slightly. "It's in Grandpop's handwriting," she added, "and it mentions me." The paper was yellowed at the edges, folded so many times the crease lines had nearly worn through. I recognized the handwriting immediately. The subtle leftward lean, the tidy loops. It was Thomas's, no doubt. I unfolded it slowly. Madeline watched my face like a child watches a verdict, not for punishment, but for truth. It wasn't a letter. It was a journal page. A single entry, dated October 11, 2022, 6 months before he passed. Madeline asked about legacy today. Said she didn't know where she fit in. I told her she's the future, whether she believes it or not. But I worry Cassandra is already trying to reshape that future. I've hidden the archive key in the old cellar box, the one behind the oak crates. If Madeline ever asks about this, I hope Dell knows what to do. No signature. No explanation. Just that steady tone Thomas always used when he knew he was running out of time, and trying to leave a map behind. I looked up at Madeline. Her eyes were wide. "I don't know what he meant," she whispered. "But when I was helping clean Cassandra's office, I found it tucked behind the bookshelf. It was inside one of those old research binders. I held the page like it might crumble. I thought I had uncovered everything. But this meant he left something else behind. Something even I didn't know about. We didn't waste time. The cellar Thomas mentioned was the original storage unit we had rented back in 1985, before the Foundation even had an office. It sat off Route 9, sandwiched between a hardware store and a lawnmower repair shop. We had used it for old campaign boxes, duplicate furniture, and decades of forgotten grant paperwork. I hadn't been back there in almost 10 years. The key still hung on the hook above our back door, same bronze tag, labeled Unit 17. We drove in silence. Madeline stared out the window. I watched her from the corner of my eye, that profile I had missed, those familiar Bennett brows. "You've grown up," I said quietly. She smiled, but her voice cracked. Not fast enough for some people. The storage unit groaned when we opened it. Dust swirled in the morning light like ghosts dancing. We moved slowly, shifting boxes, peeling back plastic covers, unstacking crates labeled in Thomas's old shorthand. Finally, behind 2 wooden crates marked B82 Archives, we found an iron lockbox with a rusted handle. It wasn't locked. Inside were 8 manila envelopes, each marked with a single name. One of them read, Madeline. Another, Delilah. I pulled them both out. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with the weight of years that had gone unspoken. I handed Madeline hers. Do you want me to step away? I asked. She shook her head. No. If this has anything to do with what they kept from you, I want you to see it too. She opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things. A letter in Thomas's handwriting, a copy of an old foundation internship application. With her name on it, a printout of an email between Cassandra and someone labeled External Recruiter LA. With Madeline's name in the subject line, she read the letter aloud. Mads, I know they told you this wasn't your path. That medicine, research, policy, all of it was above you. But I read your application. You were more ready than any intern we've ever had. Cassandra blocked it. I couldn't stop her. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder. But maybe now. You will. Madeline's face was still, no tears, just quiet fire. I knew she blocked it, she said under her breath. I knew it. I opened my own envelope next. Thomas's letter to me was short. Dell, if you're here, then you already know. What they tried to do to you was wrong. What they tried to do to Madeline was worse. I've left copies of everything. Names, email lines. It's time the next generation knows the truth. You always saw the storm coming before I did. This time, you were the lighthouse. Love, tea, my hands trembled. Not with sadness, with readiness. This wasn't just about a will anymore. This was about an entire generation being pushed out of their own legacy. And now one of them had come home. We sat cross-legged on the storage unit floor. The iron box between us, dust gathering on our knees like time itself had paused to watch. One by one, we opened the remaining envelopes. Each one was like a slow, burning fuse. One was addressed to Lydia Marino. It contained a list of financial accounts, some registered offshore, with indirect links to Bennett Development Trust, an entity Thomas had flagged in red ink. Another was labeled Callahan. Inside, transcripts of board meetings that had never been filed, and an unsigned agreement draft granting Cassandra full control over future estate directives, dated 4 months before Thomas's health declined sharply. But the one that made my heart stop was labeled Unknown Witness, Ford 13. Inside was a scanned deposition from a former foundation accountant, detailing Cassandra's unorthodox budget reallocations and the use of foundation funds to cover external consulting fees, including a luxury property in Maine, listed under a shell company tied to one of Cassandra's known associates. I looked at Madeline. Her face had gone pale. Grandma, she said, voice trembling. They didn't just cut you out. They tried to bury you. No, I said slowly, folding the documents. They tried to bury the truth, but it left roots. We didn't drive home right away. Instead, we took a detour to Lydia's office. I didn't call ahead. Some things you don't email. When we arrived, she was finishing up a call, but the moment she saw the lockbox in my arms, she waved us in without a word. We laid everything on her conference table. Letters, documents, USBs. Scans. Madeline stayed quiet while Lydia read. Her eyes moved with surgical precision. When she reached the documents from the unknown witness, she let out a sharp breath and looked at me. This changes everything, she said. How bad? I asked. She leaned back. It's no longer just probate manipulation. If even half of these accounts check out, we're talking about embezzlement, wire fraud, and abuse of charitable assets. Madeline flinched. Lydia turned to her, softening. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know this is your family. Madeline shook her head. No. My family is the one who left this for us to find, and the one sitting next to me right now. I reached over and held her hand. She didn't pull away. That night, we stayed up late. Me at the kitchen table, Madeline on the couch, both of us surrounded by files, post-its, and old coffee. She had brought her laptop and started building a digital timeline, cross-referencing email metadata with board decisions and suspicious wire transfers. Did you take coding classes or something? I asked. She gave a faint smile. I wanted to be a researcher once. Before Cassandra told my dad I wasn't focused enough, so I started teaching myself. I nodded slowly. They hadn't just blocked her internship. They had redirected her life. But here she was, right back where she belonged. By midnight, we had 3 distinct leads. A pattern of wire transfers just days before Thomas's hospitalization, a missing board vote regarding executive compensation packages, a consulting firm that only existed on paper, tied to Cassandra's husband's name. I want to go public, Madeline said. I want to show them I'm not just the granddaughter they could push aside. Not yet, I said gently. We move carefully. Cassandra may be quiet now, but she's not done. How do you know? I looked at her. Because I used to be her. Madeline blinked. I mean that I used to be the one no one saw coming. The attack didn't come through a courtroom. It came through a podcast. A 30-minute episode titled, The Battle Over the Bennett Legacy, Grief or Greed. Voiced by some overly polished host with a penchant for insinuation. Cassandra didn't appear directly, of course. That would have been too obvious. Instead, a family insider was interviewed anonymously, speaking of elderly widow unable to let go, and granddaughter being manipulated by her. I listened to it once, then a second time with Lydia and Thomas Callahan in her office. When it ended, Lydia leaned forward and asked, "Do you want to sue them for defamation?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "We don't stop the storm by yelling louder. We stop it by being louder in truth." Madeline, standing by the window, turned slowly. "Then maybe it's time we tell our version." We went public 3 days later. No drama, no dramatic press conference. Just a quiet, well-crafted open letter. Madeline posted it first. "My name is Madeline Grace Bennett. I am the granddaughter of Dr. Thomas Bennett. I was denied the chance to intern at the foundation my grandparents built, not because I lacked merit, but because I made certain people uncomfortable. Today, I reclaim my place, not in the shadow of their name, but in the light of the truth they left behind." Attached was a redacted version of Thomas's letter to her. Lydia approved every word. Thomas Callahan made sure the timeline was unassailable. Within 48 hours, the post had 17,000 shares. Then came the interviews. Then came others. Former board members, quiet employees, donors who had seen too much but stayed silent. They started reaching out. One woman, a nurse who worked part-time at Thomas's clinic, emailed us a copy of an old voice recording. A voicemail Thomas had left her, thanking her for speaking up about the shady way Cassandra handles reallocations. Another sent us scans of expense reports that had never been audited. The story was no longer ours alone. It was becoming a movement. Cassandra didn't stay silent for long. She issued a public letter, dripping with false sweetness, denying any wrongdoing, framing herself as a woman caught in a storm of grief and legacy disputes. She painted herself as the misunderstood widow of Thomas's son, a loyal executive, a mischaracterized benefactor. And then she made her biggest mistake. She accused Thomas of being manipulated in his final months by those with an emotional bias. In other words, me. I don't remember the last time my hands shook with rage. But they did that day. I sat at the table, Madeline's hand on mine, and I said only one thing. It's time to stop defending. It's time to tell the whole damn truth. The recording wasn't labeled. It was buried deep within a folder Madeline had recovered from the USB Thomas left in the cellar. Just an audio file titled, Betrayal, MP3. We didn't notice it at first. But one quiet afternoon, while Madeline was recataloguing the evidence for Lydia, she clicked it open, and there he was, his voice. Weak but unmistakably Thomas. April 3rd, just after dinner. I'm leaving this as a record. Because my hands are too unsteady to write, and my thoughts too heavy to hold. Cassandra wants me to revise the board charter again. She says it's to make things easier. But easier for who? Dell doesn't know. I haven't told her. I'm ashamed. I let things drift. I thought love could outrun ambition. But I was wrong. If anything happens to me, and I think something will soon, I need whoever hears this to understand Delilah Bennett built this legacy with me. She didn't marry into it. She molded it. Every dollar, every line of research, every life touched. She was the silent spine of it all. If you try to take her out of the story, then you're not telling the truth. And I want the truth. That's all. We didn't need lawyers after that. We didn't need press. We didn't need revenge. We uploaded the file publicly, posted a short statement. The truth doesn't need amplification. It just needs to be heard. Within hours, every major outlet that had once parroted Cassandra's narrative went silent. 2 days later, the Foundation Board issued a formal apology to Delilah Mae Bennett and Madeline Grace Bennett. 3 days after that, Cassandra issued a formal withdrawal from any association with the Foundation, past or future, and resigned from all nonprofit leadership roles. She has not spoken publicly since. The Foundation was restructured. A new initiative was launched in Thomas's name. The Lighthouse Fellowship, focused on mentorship for underrepresented youth in medical research. Madeline was offered a full-time role as project lead. She accepted. But not before calling me from across the hall and asking, "Would you chair it with me?" I said yes. Not because I needed a title, but because I had something else now. A partner, a granddaughter, a legacy reclaimed. The first public event of the new foundation drew over 200 attendees. At the end, Madeline took the mic. She told our story. Without bitterness, without vengeance, only clarity. She ended with Thomas's last words from the recordings. "If you try to take her out of the story, then you're not telling the truth." Then, she added her owns. "I came back not just to defend my grandmother. I came back to remind you that silence is not the same as weakness, and that truth always finds its way home." That night, back at the house, we sat together on the porch swing. No need for words. Just the creak of wood, the warmth of shared presence, and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, we had finished what Thomas started. But more importantly, we had started something new. Together. Sometimes legacy isn't stolen in a courtroom. It's lost in the silence of those too tired to speak. But when one voice rises, even if it trembles, and another joins, even if it's young, the story rewrites itself. Delilah didn't win because she shouted. She won because she endured. And Madeline, she didn't just recover the truth, she became it. There's a certain peace that comes after a storm. Not the celebratory kind. The quiet kind. The kind where the house still stands, but the air smells different. Stripped of false sweetness, exposed. That's how the days felt after Cassandra disappeared from our lives. The foundation was rebuilding. Madeline was thriving. And I had started, very slowly, to let myself breathe again. I thought that was the last chapter. Until the letter came. It arrived without warning. No return address, no stamp. Just a thin cream envelope. Slid beneath my front door like a ghost's confession. My name was written on the front in ink I recognized immediately. Thomas's. Except the handwriting was younger, sharper. It was dated 1986. I sat down on the edge of the couch, holding the envelope like it might burn through my fingers. Madeline was at work. The house was quiet. Only the ticking of the grandfather clock, the one Thomas had restored with his own hands, kept me grounded. I opened the letter. And my heart stopped. Dell. If you're reading this, then I've either been too cowardly to destroy it, or someone has decided the past belongs to you after all. There was a woman. Her name was Celeste. We met before you and I married. Once briefly again after. During a medical conference in Seattle. I don't write this to wound you. I write it because I may be a father. I never confirmed it. She didn't ask for anything. But she sent a letter once. No demands. Just a name. Leela. I don't know if she's mine. But I've carried her name for years now. I never told you. I should have. I'm sorry. You've always deserved more than what I had the courage to give. I sat still for a long time, not because I was shocked, but because deep down I already knew. There had always been something unspoken in the way Thomas looked out the window on long rainy nights. Something in the way he never quite answered when I asked about that Seattle trip, but I never pressed. And he never offered. And now, I had a name. That night, I didn't tell Madeline. I didn't know how. I needed to understand it first. To hold it. To carry the weight of it without dropping the legacy we'd just reclaimed. But that letter, that name, it changed everything. Because if Thomas had a daughter, then someone else had been erased from the story long before me, and I was going to find her. The next morning, I pulled out a dusty leather, bound planner from the bottom drawer of Thomas's old desk. Seattle Conference, October 1986. That was the only entry written in all caps. The rest was vague. Abbreviations, hotel addresses, room numbers for speaking engagements. But one note stood out. Scribbled on the side of the margin. Red umbrella. Corner table. She came anyway. I stared at that line until my eyes blurred. He never used phrases like that. He was a scientist, precise, direct. But this was emotional, personal. Celeste came anyway, which meant he had told her not to. And she had come. That's where I started. I called Madeline first. I couldn't carry this one alone. She arrived within the hour, no questions asked, just a bag of groceries and a steady gaze. I handed her the letter. She read it once, then twice, then folded it gently and placed it on the table. So, she said, you think Leela could be my aunt? I think she already is, I said quietly, whether the DNA says so or not. Madeline nodded, already reaching for her laptop. What are we looking for? Her mother's name was Celeste, I said. All I know is she was in Seattle, sometime in the late 80s. Madeline started typing. "Let's search hospital records," she said. "Maybe Thomas kept contact through work. That's the only thread we've got." 3 hours in, we had a hit. A research collaboration filed in 1987 between Dr. Thomas Bennett and Dr. Celeste Adair on pediatric oncology in underserved communities. It had only one footnote that mattered: primary research conducted at Pacific General Clinic, archival access permitted by Dr. C. Adair. "Clinic's still open," Madeline said, scanning the site. "Barely. But it says records older than 2000 are held off-site. Physical archives only." "I'm going to Seattle," I said. She looked up, startled. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "This one, I need to do myself." 2 days later, I stood in front of the Pacific General Archive building, an old converted firehouse with ivy creeping across its brick. Inside, a receptionist named Jody, early 60s, warm smile, thick glasses, escorted me down a flight of stairs into the record vault. "This is where the old bones live," she chuckled. I explained I was looking for documents connected to Celeste Adair, sometime around 1986 to 1988. She gave me a long look, then asked gently, "Are you family?" I hesitated. I said, "Not officially. But yes." We pulled box after box from the shelves. Most of it was dry. Funding logs, outreach reports, trial notes. Until finally, Jody handed me a slim red folder labeled simply L. Adair, special consent. Inside was a single sheet, a pediatric admission record from June 1988. Patient Leela Adair, age 1.8 years, mother Dr. Celeste Adair, father not listed. But what made my breath catch was the emergency contact line. It had been scribbled out, then replaced in different handwriting. "In case of emergency, contact D. Bennett confidentially." Thomas had listed me. The page shook in my hands. He never told me. He'd written my name. In her file, in secret. Maybe not to lie, but maybe to leave a thread, just in case this day ever came. Jody said quietly, "That file was never meant to be found, you know." I looked up. "But it was kept." She nodded. "Sometimes the ones that aren't supposed to survive are the ones that do." When I left the building, the sun had started to dip behind the gray Seattle skyline. I stood at the curb, the file clutched to my chest, and I whispered out loud, "Leela, I don't know who you are yet, but I'm coming to find you." It took Madeline 3 days to find Leela. I had barely returned from Seattle when she called me at 10:47 p.m. Whispering like she'd stumbled across a buried treasure she wasn't sure she had permission to touch. "I found her," she said. "She's real?" "She's more than real. Grandma, she's a professor, literature and ethics, teaches at a small college in upstate New York, has a few published essays. I read one. You'll like her. She writes like someone who's been waiting her whole life to be heard." I sat down. "And you're sure it's her?" "There's a faculty bio with a birth year 1986. Place of birth Seattle. Mother Celeste Adair. No mention of a father. Silence. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Does she know about Thomas?" Madeline hesitated. "I don't think so. But I think she's guessed something. I didn't write her a letter. Didn't call. I got on a plane, rented a car, and drove to the campus where she taught. A small liberal arts college nestled between hills and maples already tipping toward amber. I sat in on her lecture, Ethics in Storytelling. She spoke clearly, decisively, her voice soft but commanding, and she moved like someone who had long ago decided not to apologize for taking up space. Afterward, I waited outside the hall. She walked out with a leather bag slung over one shoulder, a pen tucked behind her ear, and a guarded look in her eyes, like someone always halfway ready to leave. "Lila," I asked. She stopped, narrowed her eyes. "Yes." I stepped forward, careful. "My name is Delilah Bennett. I know who you are." Her voice was steady, but her hands tightened around the strap of her bag. "You're his wife." I nodded. "I was, for 41 years. A long pause. Then she said, "What do you want?" We sat in the campus cafe. Leela didn't order anything. I got tea, but never touched it. "I only found out about you a few weeks ago," I said quietly. "Thomas left a letter. It wasn't meant for anyone else. But I read it. I figured," she said. "My mother told me enough. She said he wasn't cruel. Just scared." I nodded. "That's accurate." Leela leaned back. "You want to ask if I'm his daughter?" "No," I said. "I already believe you are." Her lips parted slightly. I continued. "I came because I needed to tell you that even if Thomas didn't do the right thing while he was alive, He tried to leave space for it after. I slid the emergency contact form across the table, the one from Pacific General. She stared at it, read it twice, then folded it shut. Her voice cracked. That handwriting, it's his. Yes. She looked out the window. A single maple leaf blew against the glass and stuck there. You're not here to apologize for him. No, I said. I'm here to acknowledge you. She didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, thank you for not bringing a lawyer. We didn't hug, we didn't cry. We sat. Two women, same age in the eyes, same ache in the hands, one shaped by a name, one shaped by the lack of it. And in that moment, we weren't enemies. We were grief's missing mirrors. As I stood to leave, Leela said quietly, I don't know if I want to be part of any legacy. I've built my life without one. I understand, I said. But if you ever change your mind, the door's open. She nodded once. I'm still not sure why you came. I came, I said, because I refused to leave another woman erased. Then I walked away, but not out, just back into waiting. 2 weeks passed. No emails, no letters, no word from Leela. I didn't expect one. I didn't go looking again. Some silences aren't cold. Some are just necessary. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, Madeline came into the kitchen holding her phone like it was made of glass. She emailed you, she said, setting it gently on the table. I opened the message. It was brief. Delilah, I've read through the documents you left with me. I believe you when you say he tried. There's something I want to show you, but only if you're willing to come alone. I'm not looking for an apology. I'm looking for closure, on my terms. Friday, 3 p.m. You'll know the dress. No subject line. Just certainty, and a test. I arrived early. It was a modest cemetery on the edge of town. Old stones, white oaks. The kind of place grief could breathe without having to explain itself. Leela was waiting at the far corner beneath a tree, wearing a brown wool coat, scarf wrapped loosely. She didn't wave. She just stood there like she had always belonged in this stillness. Next to her was a headstone. Not Thomas's, her mother's. Celeste Adair, 1956-2004, to live in truth is the fiercest form of peace. She died when I was 18, Leela said as I approached. Cancer. Pancreatic. Fast. Quiet, like her. I nodded. I'm sorry. She looked at the headstone. She told me to never come looking for him. Said it would only hurt more. Said love, when denied long enough, starts to rot in the wrong places. I didn't interrupt. She gave me one photo of him. A blurry one. Said his name once. After that, it became a ghost I tried not to chase. Leela pulled something from her coat pocket. A folded page. She handed it to me. He did write to me. Once. When I was 11. I opened the letter. Thomas's writing. Leela, I don't know what you've been told. I don't know if you ever want to meet me. I don't even know if I have the right to say I miss someone I never knew. But I think about you. I wonder if you like books. If you ask hard questions. If your laughter sounds like your mother's. I'm not asking for a place in your life. I just wanted you to know that you exist in mine. Every day. At tea I handed the letter back. Leela didn't move. Then she said, I don't want a role in the foundation. I don't want money. I don't want to be a name on any wall. I looked at her. What do you want? She finally turned to me fully. I want to sit in a room one day and hear someone say his name, and mine, in the same sentence. Not to celebrate him, not to erase him, but to acknowledge the whole story. I stepped closer. We can do that. No press, she added. No announcement. Just one quiet event. One seat with my name on it. It's yours, I said. And one more thing. She reached into her bag and handed me a journal, old leather-bound, frayed edges. I think he meant you to have this. Mom kept it hidden. I opened the first page. It was Thomas's handwriting. But not a speech, not a will. It was poetry. And every entry was titled, To D for the days I never had the words. I pressed the book to my chest. Leela looked away and whispered, I don't forgive him, but I won't carry his silence anymore. I'm giving it back. To you. Then she walked away. I didn't stop her. Some chapters don't close with a hug. Some just turn the page. We held the gathering in the Foundation's old reading room. It wasn't large. It wasn't fancy. Just a sunlit room with tall windows. Bookshelves lined with the medical journals Thomas had collected for decades, and a single oak table in the center. We didn't invite press. We didn't dress up. We invited truth, and she came, quiet but unmistakable. Madeline set up a single nameplate at the center seat. Leela Bennett, she asked if that was okay. Leela stared at it for a moment, then nodded. I'm not used to it, she said softly. But maybe it's time I let that name live somewhere other than in a sealed envelope. The event was called Voices Unrecorded. The Women Behind the Work. It was framed as a legacy panel, honoring the roles of wives, daughters, and staff who had supported the foundation during its formative years. But everyone in the room knew what it really was. It was a homecoming for the truth. Leela spoke last. She told them about Celeste, a woman who raised a daughter in the shadows of a secret, and never once let bitterness turn into cruelty. She told them about receiving a single letter from Thomas, and keeping it for 23 years before letting it see sunlight again. Then she said, there are parts of our story that will never be clean. That's what happens when people get scared. But what matters now is that the story is whole. I am not a legacy. I am not a scandal. I am not an accident. I am the footnote they forgot to delete. And today I write myself into the margins. The room was silent. Then someone began to clap. Then another. And by the end, every hand in that room moved, not out of obligation, but out of respect. Later that evening, the three of us sat in the garden behind the foundation building. Madeline brought tea. Leela brought silence. I brought the journal. I read a few lines aloud. Lines Thomas had written in those early years, when he couldn't say what he felt, but wrote it anyway. There are women in my life who carry me even when I say I'm standing, who make the air quieter, and the ground less cruel. Madeline placed her hand on mine. And Leela. She just closed her eyes, not in pain, not in grief, but in something almost peaceful. Some stories don't need rewriting. They need revealing. Thomas didn't leave a perfect legacy. He left an unfinished one. And it was the women he left behind, not lawyers, not wealth, not boards, who made the ending matter. Not because they forgave him, but because they told the whole story, so no one else had to carry the weight of being forgotten again. I didn't want to be a speaker. I was a gardener, a reader, a woman who had learned to move through grief like it was weather, unpredictable, but survivable. But then came the email. Subject line, Tax Hudson Valley featured speaker invitation. I almost deleted it. Then I saw the note at the bottom. We heard your story, the way you reclaimed not just a legacy, but a family history that had been denied. We believe the world needs to hear what justice sounds like when it arrives late, but still arrives. Madeline read the email over my shoulder and grinned. You're going, she said. I'm not a public speaker, I protested. You've been one your whole life, she replied. Just in private rooms. Leela agreed to help me write the talk. At first, I hesitated. But then I realized, who better? She had once been a ghost in our story. Now she was helping me narrate it. We met 3 evenings in a row, drafting in longhand, reading aloud, crossing things out. On the 4th night, she said something that stuck. You're not speaking for applause. You're speaking so no one else has to lose 20 years of truth. But the day of the event arrived. The stage was minimalist, a red carpet, a black backdrop, one single spotlight. I wore dark blue, simple jewelry, no notes in hand, just my heart and Thomas's oak lapel pin on my collar. The lights dimmed. My name was called. I stepped onto the stage. Good evening, I began. My name is Delilah Mae Bennett. And I didn't come here to talk about injustice. I came here to talk about what happens after it. I spoke for 16 minutes. I told them about Thomas, about Cassandra, about Leela, about Madeline. But more importantly, I told them this: justice is not a courtroom. It's a kitchen table. It's the chair left empty beside you. It's the question that goes unanswered for 20 years until someone dares to ask it again. When I finished, the room was completely still. Then, a wave of applause. Long, slow, standing. But I didn't see any of that, because in the 5th row, near the end of the aisle, I saw a man I hadn't seen in nearly 40 years. Hair silvered, shoulders hunched, but unmistakable. Michael Langford, Thomas's closest friend in med school, and the only person who ever knew about Seattle, before me. He waited until the auditorium cleared. He stood in the shadows near the aisle, hands folded, eyes not meeting mine until I stepped directly in front of him. Delilah, he said quietly, as if my name were a bruise. Michael. We hadn't spoken since 1989. I remember because that was the year Thomas stopped attending alumni weekends, and never told me why. I had my suspicions. Now they were walking toward me, wearing corduroy and gilt. We found a quiet spot outside the venue, a bench beneath a low maple tree that reminded me of Vermont in late September. Michael sat slowly, as if the years had stacked bricks across his back. "I'm not here to justify anything," he began. "Good," I said. He gave a faint smile. "Thomas always said you didn't let people hide behind polite regret." I didn't answer. He continued. "I knew about Celeste. I knew he went back to see her after that Seattle conference. I also knew he was never the same after." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old, worn envelope, yellowed with time, but sealed. "I was supposed to give you this if he didn't." I took the envelope in both hands. It had my name on it. Dell, not Delilah, not Mrs. Bennett, just Dell. How he always signed cards, napkin notes, sticky reminders on the fridge. My fingers trembled. "You kept it for nearly 40 years. Michael looked ashamed. He made me promise. Said if he ever passed suddenly, or got too sick to speak clearly, I'd be the one to decide if it ever got delivered." He paused. "I didn't want to stir up pain." "You didn't want to stir up legacy," I corrected. "Because it might splash on yours." That one landed. He nodded slowly. "You're right." That night, I didn't read the letter right away. I let it sit on my nightstand, like a visitor not yet ready to enter the room. I stared at it for a long time. I don't know if I was afraid of what it might say, or afraid that it might not say enough. Eventually, I opened it. Inside was a single page. No date, no greeting, just Thomas's words, tight, urgent, as if written all at once in a moment of unbearable clarity. "Dell, I didn't know how to carry both truths, you and Leela. I thought silence was mercy. I see now it was control. I thought I had time. I always think I have time. I never told you because I didn't want to lose the version of me I became with you. But Leela deserved to know she wasn't forgotten. And you deserve to never have to find out like this. If you're reading this, then I failed at both. I love you. That never changed, even when I was a coward." I read it 3 times, then folded it neatly and placed it in the same box as the other letters. The ones from the storage unit, the poetry journal, the notes to Madeline, they belong together now, not as evidence, but as truth, and truth, once revealed, doesn't need to be revisited. Just remembered. The first email came that same night, then a second, then a call from a journalist at The Atlantic asking for a follow-up piece to my text talk. Then NPR reached out. Then The Guardian. They all wanted the same thing, the full story. The foundation scandal, the erased daughter, the widow who refused to disappear, the granddaughter who helped her fight. It had all the makings of a headline. But it wasn't a story, it was our life. Madeline was eager. "This is it," she said. "This isn't just about healing anymore. It's about reform. Do you know how many people, especially women, get erased like you and Leela did? This could spark real change." She meant well, and she wasn't wrong. But Leela saw it differently. When we told her about the requests, her body stiffened. "No," she said almost before we finished. Madeline blinked. "No what?" "No press. No interviews. No exposés." Madeline tilted her head. "Why not?" Leela's voice was calm. Too calm. "Because I've lived outside the margins for 36 years. Now that I finally belong in this family, I'm not about to become someone's narrative again, even if it's for a good cause." Silence. Then Madeline, her voice tight. "So we just pretend it never happened?" "No," Leela snapped. "We remember it, we tell it privately. We pass it down like a quilt, not like a billboard." I stepped in before it escalated. "This isn't a fight," I said gently. "It's a choice, and it's one we all have to make together." Leela crossed her arms. "You got your justice. Madeline wants her message. What do I get?" I looked her in the eye. "You get to say no." That night I sat alone in the reading room. The red journal of Thomas's poetry was in my lap. One entry caught my eye. I hadn't seen it before. "Let them tell the story only when the ending feels like their own. Until then, let it be enough that the truth survived." The next morning, I emailed every journalist who had reached out. I thanked them. And I declined. Madeline didn't speak to either of us for 2 days. Then, on the 3rd, she came into the kitchen holding 3 cups of tea and said simply, "I still think it should have been louder." But maybe it was never supposed to be heard by the world. Maybe it was supposed to echo in just one room, so no one ever feels invisible in that room again. Leela reached for her cup without a word, and I smiled, because we had found our agreement, not in a headline, But in a home, it was Madeline's idea. They're hosting a symposium on generational memory and private justice at the university, she said. The professor read about you. She wants you to come speak, not as a public figure, but as a living archive. I laughed when she said that. A living archive. That sounds dusty. Madeline grinned. That's why it's perfect. So I agreed. It wasn't a stage, no spotlight. Just a carpeted lecture hall with dim lighting, 20 students, and one microphone passed around like a communal truth teller. They didn't ask for the foundation story. They asked about quiet survival. How to hold dignity in a world that files women like paperclips useful until bent. How to carry memory that doesn't belong in courtrooms, but still deserves justice. I told them what I knew. Not what I'd read in books, what I'd lived. There are two kinds of justice, I said. One that makes noise, and one that sits beside you at the table and says, I believe you. The first changes the system. The second changes a life. Then a girl, maybe 19, notebook full of margin scribbles, raised her hand. She looked down when she spoke. Did you ever wish you had left? Walked away. Started over somewhere else. Before any of the fighting. Before any of the remembering. The room went still. Even the professor paused her pen. I took a deep breath and said, for the first time, Wes. More than once. After Thomas died, I wanted to sell the house, burn the journals, leave the box unopened. Because I thought maybe if no one else remembered me, I could learn to forget myself too. Silence. Then I smiled, but I didn't. Because someone always comes looking. A granddaughter. A letter. A name in a file. And when they come, you'd better be there to tell them who they are before the world tells them something else. Afterward, the girl came up to me. She didn't say much. Just, my grandmother left too soon. I think I needed to hear her voice and yours. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't fully grasped. Maybe the story wasn't mine anymore. Maybe it had become a place for others to rest too. It arrived on a Monday. Plain envelope. Handwritten address. No return information. Inside was a short note. Mrs. Bennet, I was a patient of your husband's many years ago. I think you deserve to know what he did for me. And what he never told you. I understand if you'd rather not. But if you choose to, the story is enclosed. With respect. A.S. Tucked behind it was a second envelope sealed. On the front, just 2 words. Your decision. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I called Leela and Madeline. Asked them to come over that evening. We sat at the dining table, same place we had eaten toast and cried, and read poetry over hot tea and cold truths. I laid the envelope in the center. Madeline, curious as ever, leaned in. Do we know who A.S. is? Leela shook her head. No record in the patient archives we have. Could be pseudonym. Could be someone Thomas helped outside the system. I looked at them both. I don't know what's in it. But I know one thing, whatever it is, it doesn't change who he was to me. They didn't pressure me, they just waited quietly. Patiently. Finally, I said, I'm tired of secrets deciding for me. Let's read it. Inside was a letter. 5 pages, neatly typed. It was from a man named Aaron Shepard, now in his late 40s, who had once been a foster child in one of Thomas's early pediatric research trials. He knew I was undocumented. He knew the trial would put a spotlight on me. But he still let me in. Said, every child deserves to be studied, not ignored. Aaron had gone on to become a physician himself. He now ran a free clinic in rural New Mexico. At the end of the letter, he wrote, I asked your husband once why he let me in when he could have lost funding. He said, because I've already failed one child I didn't fight for. I won't do it again. I didn't understand it then. I do now. I think her name was Leela. We sat in silence for a long time. Then Leela stood and walked to the kitchen. She came back with Thomas's old teapot, the one he used when guests came over, and set it down. Put the letter in the family box, she said. With the rest, I nodded. She wasn't angry. She wasn't emotional. She was still standing. And that, I realized, was the final gift Thomas had unknowingly left behind. A woman who wasn't broken by the silence, but reshaped by the truth. That night, as the 3 of us sat in warm lamplight, with the letters beside us and the kettle whistling, I knew the legacy wasn't Thomas's anymore. It was ours, and we weren't done writing it. Justice isn't just about righting a wrong. It's about choosing what to carry forward, and what to lay down. Delilah didn't chase every shadow of Thomas's past. She didn't seek perfection. She chose memory over myth, presence over pride, and family, even one born from fracture, over silence. Because some legacies aren't inherited. They're rebuilt, choice by choice, truth by truth. The call came on a Thursday. I represent Brookhaven Publishing, the voice said. We read the text transcript. Your story, it shook us. We'd like to offer you a memoir deal. I paused. A memoir? I hadn't even written in a journal since 1994. Still, something in me leaned forward. What kind of book are you thinking? There was a pause on the other end. Then, would like to frame it as a story of love, betrayal, and resilience. We think it could sit alongside books like Educated and The Glass Castle. But with a scientific, legacy-driven angle, strong female lead, a family dynasty, a scandal, a triumph. It wasn't until they sent the draft proposal that I saw the line that broke something in me. We suggest minimizing the Leela storyline. Too complicated emotionally, might confuse readers. I printed the proposal and stared at it on my kitchen table for 2 days. I didn't call them back. I didn't call anyone. I just stared. They wanted my story. But not all of it. I called Leela first. She didn't say much after I read her the line. Just, so they want the myth, not the memory. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. She added, softly, if you sign it, I'll understand. Just don't pretend I never existed. Not again. I hung up and called Madeline. She didn't even let me finish. Absolutely not. If they don't want Leela, they don't want you. The only reason this story matters is because it's real. All of it. But they say the market can't handle that complexity. I replied. Madeline laughed bitter. Then the market needs to grow up. That night, I went back to the red journal. The one filled with Thomas's poetry. I flipped through the pages until I found it. A short entitled one, on the very last page. Write what hurts. Write what heals. But above all, write what lives after you. The next morning, I emailed Brookhaven. Thank you for your interest. But if you ask me to remove the woman my husband never claimed, then you are asking me to participate in his silence. I already paid the price for that once. I won't again. The truth doesn't need your approval. It already has our names. I didn't get a reply. But I got something better. That evening, Madeline handed me a small, handmade notebook. On the front, the real legacy vol. 1, inside, she had written, you don't need a publisher, you have us. Let's write it together. Leela added the second line. And this time, don't skip the chapters with my name in them. So we began. 3 women, 1 table. And all the truth we refused to leave out. The manuscript grew slowly, Madeline typed. Leela edited. I narrated. Sometimes we disagreed. Sometimes we cried. Sometimes we just sat in silence, letting the weight of remembering settle like dust. We called the draft. What was left out? It wasn't just about Thomas. It was about what happens when a woman is written out, when a daughter is unacknowledged, when truth is treated like bad PR. It was messy, which is why it was honest. Then, 2 weeks into final edits, I received a letter. This time not handwritten, official, cold, legal. From a law firm representing the Bennett Center for Biomedical Ethics. The National Research Institute named after Thomas. The one Cassandra had helped establish before she was exposed. The letter was 6 pages long, but one sentence hit hardest. Was strongly advised that you cease distribution of any written material that may compromise the reputation of Dr. Thomas Bennett or suggest unethical conduct not legally substantiated. I read it aloud at the kitchen table. Madeline's hands curled into fists. Leela didn't blink. They want to protect a name, she said. Not a man. Not a truth, a brand. They never cared about the rest of him. I murmured. Only the parts they could fund. Madeline stood. We can fight this. Leela held up a hand. No. We both looked at her. No, Madeline echoed, stunned. Leela met our eyes. We don't fight it in court. We fight it by publishing anyway. On our own. Under our own imprint. With our own community. Let them try to silence 3 women who already survived silence. We renamed the imprint Third Voice Press. 1 for each of us. We uploaded the manuscript online. Offered it as a free download with the note. This is not a bestseller. It's a memory. One that deserves to live. Even if it makes some names uncomfortable. The backlash came fast. Emails, threats. Disclaimers from institutions. But something else came too. Messages. Hundreds of them. From women, from grandchildren, from estranged daughters, from retired nurses and forgotten assistants. All saying the same thing, thank you. This was my story too. I just didn't have the words. That night, the three of us sat around the fireplace. No celebration, just warmth. I looked at them and said, "He left behind one truth." We turned it into 1,000 voices. It was a plain white envelope. But the seal told me it wasn't fan mail this time. Harborwell School of Medicine, the place where Thomas had taught his first lectures, mentored his first protégés, published his first peer-reviewed paper. Inside, a formal letter. "We write to inform you that the Board of Trustees has voted unanimously to rename the Thomas R. Bennett Lecture Hall in light of the new information brought to light through recent publications. We would be honored if you would consider attending the rededication ceremony and offer a few words on behalf of historical transparency and institutional accountability." I reread the line 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. They weren't doing this for Thomas. They were doing it for themselves. For PR, for face, saving. For the illusion of reform, I called Madeline. She picked up after the first ring. "They're renaming the hall," I said. Her voice rose. "Seriously? What are they calling it now?" "They haven't decided. They're asking me to speak." There was a long pause. Then, "Are you going to?" That night, I sat on the porch with the invitation beside me. Leela joined me, 2 mugs of tea in hand. I showed her the letter. She read it once, eyes unreadable. "Do you want to go?" she asked. I hesitated. I don't know. Part of me wants to watch that name come down. But part of me wonders if that changes anything. If removing a plaque does anything more than shift the shame. Leela was quiet. Then she said, "Maybe it's not about taking the name down. Maybe it's about what you say as it falls." So I went. Not in black, not in mourning. I wore a cream blouse and a crimson scarf. Thomas's favorite color. The hall was already stripped of his name. A temporary banner hung in its place, new dedication pending. I stepped up to the podium. Room full of faculty, alumni, press. I looked out and said, "He was brilliant. And he was flawed. And for too long we let one hide the other. This is not about canceling a man. It's about completing his story. If you want to teach future doctors anything today, teach them this: healing without honesty is just performance. You don't need to erase Thomas. You need to include the parts he avoided. Don't rename this hall to forget. Rename it to remember better." Silence. Then, applause. But I didn't stay. I left before the reception, before the interviews, because the story didn't belong in marble or brass. It belonged in hearts that would carry it forward. When I got home, Leela was waiting on the porch. "How did it feel?" she asked. I smiled. Like I wasn't speaking for him, I was speaking for us. It started with an email. Subject line: "Your story deserves to be seen." Attached was a proposal from a mid-tier production company in Los Angeles with a track record of adapting memoirs into streaming miniseries. The offer was generous. 6 figures for rights, executive consultant role, final script approval with reasonable studio oversight. Madeline was thrilled. "What can reach millions, Delilah?" Think about it. People who had never read a memoir. Leela was quieter. "I want it told, but not twisted." So we scheduled a Zoom meeting with the producers. They were young, stylish, smiling. "We love the bones of your story," one of them said. Another added, "Delilah's arc is cinematic. There's loss, strength, reinvention. That Tadiq scene, gold." I raised my eyebrows. "What about Lila?" A pause. Then, "So we were thinking, to make it cleaner for viewers, Leela's character could be reimagined as Thomas's assistant who uncovers the truth. That way, we keep the mystery. Build to the reveal, plus it avoids complicated parentage issues. Those can lose audiences." Leela stood up and walked out of frame. Madeline covered her face with her hands. I leaned toward the screen and asked, "You want to erase the child he denied and make her his employee?" The lead producer tried to recover. "Not erase!" Reframe. "It's about narrative clarity." I ended the call, without saying goodbye. That night, Leela didn't come over. I found her the next morning, sitting on the back steps, clutching a photo of her and Thomas at a science fair. She was 8. He was pretending not to smile. She said, without looking up, "I'd rather be forgotten than fictionalized." I sat beside her. "Then we don't sell. Let them write their own drama. Ours is already real enough." We released a statement that week. Our story is not for sale. Not unless every voice is kept intact. You can't rewrite the pain and call it justice. We lived it. That's enough. The press loved the drama. Daughter turned assistant. Memoir author walks out on deal. The public did too. And we didn't need a show, because something better happened. A group of independent filmmakers, all women, all former caregivers or daughters or forgotten footnotes, reached out with this message. We don't need to add drama. You've already survived it. Let us tell it right. And for the first time, Leela said yes. The premiere was held in a small indie theater in Boston. No red carpet, no champagne, just folding chairs, warm popcorn, and a screen that felt too large for a story so personal. The film was titled, What Was Left Out, just like our manuscript. But now it had images. Leela's voice, Thomas's handwriting on screen, and mine narrating the gaps between silence and survival. The room was full, young women, old men, people with notebooks and quiet eyes. Some crying before the film even started. Halfway through, during the scene where Leela reads her own birth certificate for the first time, I turned to look at her. She didn't cry. She didn't smile, she just breathed. As if for the first time in decades, she no longer had to hold it all in. Then I looked further, past Madeline, past the last row of standing guests, and saw him, a man in his 70s, thick, gray beard, wire, frame glasses, leather notebook on his lap. I recognized the notebook before I recognized the man. It was Jeremy Cross, Thomas's old research partner, the one who vanished after 1993, the one who knew about the clinic, about the journals, and said nothing. After the film, the audience stood, applause, tears, hugs, no words. But Jeremy didn't move. He stayed seated, alone, so I walked up to him. Leela noticed, followed 2 steps behind. He looked up at me, eyes softer than I remembered. I was wrong to leave, he said. I didn't respond. He looked at Leela. I should have told you. She stared back, arms crossed. I don't want an apology, she said. Jeremy nodded. I didn't come to give one. I came to listen. And I did. He stood, gently set the notebook down on the empty seat beside him. Then left. I picked it up. Inside letters, dozens, all written to Thomas. None sent. The last one dated 2 weeks before Thomas died. It read, if you won't claim her, at least don't erase her. She exists, Tom. And so does your failure to say it out loud. I handed it to Leela. She read that line over and over, then whispered, someone else remembered. I nodded. And finally, he told us. That night we didn't celebrate. We sat at the kitchen table. 3 women, 1 story, no lies left. And in the quiet, I realized this wasn't justice. It was something better. A record, a refusal, a love story, not of romance, but a return gesture of truth that survived being buried. Sometimes, the loudest justice isn't a courtroom victory or a media spectacle. It's the quiet moment when your truth is finally heard, and no one dares to rewrite it again. It was Madeline who saw the headline first. She sent a screenshot to our group chat at 6:20 a.m. No words, just I opened it half awake. The Bennett Award for Medical Leadership to be revived in honor of Dr. Thomas R. Bennett. Published in MedInsight Weekly. My tea went cold in my hands. We had removed his name from a lecture hall. We had published the story. We had stood our ground when the studios came knocking. But the world has a short memory. And the ones with money, they have shorter ethics. The article was glowing. Dr. Bennett's pioneering spirit and vision continue to inspire a new generation. The revived award will celebrate those who demonstrate excellence in both research and mentorship. This is about celebrating the positive legacy, said board member Charles Yu. We believe in balance, not cancellation. Balance, that word made me sick. That morning, we met at my kitchen table. Same table where we'd written the book, rehearsed the TEDx speech, read Jeremy's letters. Leela was silent, arms folded. Madeline was already digging. They're rewriting the narrative, she said. This award used to be canceled back in 2002 after the anonymous ethics report. Same year Cassandra went quiet. She slid her laptop around to show us a PDF, old documents, meeting minutes, an archived internal memo. In the margins of one scanned note, rebrand as Legacy Award by 2025. Memories fade. Funding doesn't. Leela finally spoke. They erased me. Now they want to polish him. I nodded. They didn't just erase you, Leela. They erased the lesson. 3 days later, a formal letter arrived. Thick paper, gold trim. Dear Ms. Delilah James, as one of Dr. Bennett's most notable collaborators, we cordially invite you to attend the 2025 Bennett Award ceremony and deliver brief remarks during the dedication. I almost laughed. They want me to eulogize a man I buried twice. Leela looked at the letter, then at me. Let's not decline. Let's go. But not as guests. We didn't RSVP. We registered as press. We requested a press table. brought our own mics, brought our own camera crew, and brought something else, a sealed petition, signed by over 18,000 medical professionals, researchers, and survivors, all demanding the award be renamed, or at least reframed to include the full story of Thomas Bennett. The preamble read, "This is not about erasing a man. It is about refusing to reward a myth." At the bottom of the petition, one signature in delicate cursive, Leila Bennett. First time she had ever used the name. The event was held at the Wilshire Grand Ballroom. Tall ceilings, gold chandeliers, tables lined with white linens and carefully folded place cards. We sat at table 18, the one nearest to the emergency exit. Fitting. Delilah wore a dark blue dress. Leila wore black. Madeline wore red. "Because I want them to look at me when I nod," she said. The stage was set with a large screen, looping photos of Thomas, headshots, lecture halls, one with him shaking hands with a former president. No mention of the investigation, no clip from the documentary, no mention of Leila. The host took the stage. A woman in a gold suit, scripted down to her eyelashes. "Today, we honor a man whose brilliance lit the path for thousands." Thomas Bennett was not only a visionary, he was a father figure to so many in medicine. I heard Leila inhale sharply, but she didn't move. They unveiled the award trophy. Tall glass with etched letters. The Bennett Award for Legacy Leadership in Medicine. Then, and now, to introduce our keynote speaker, a special guest who worked closely with Dr. Bennett during his early years. My stomach dropped. It was Charles Yu, the same board member quoted in the article, the one who called it balance. He took the stage with practiced warmth. "We know the world is messy, but we choose to focus on what Dr. Bennett built, his mentorship, his ideas, his vision." He paused for applause, then said the line that would become infamous. "We don't need to retell every story. We need to preserve the good ones." And that's when Leila stood up. No shouting, no protest signs, just one long fabric banner she'd kept folded in her purse. She unfolded it with calm hands and walked slowly toward the stage. People turned. Cameras flashed. She held it high above her head, in bold black letters. "Teach BYKS. Teach each Ka." Leila Bennett, silence. Charles Yu froze mid-sentence. The host whispered to someone side stage. Security began to move, but not fast. Madeline was already standing, camera up. Delilah followed, walking slowly toward the front with a second folded paper. It wasn't a protest sign. It was a copy of the petition. Delilah handed it to the host. Leila stood firm, arms raised. And then someone in the audience stood too. A woman in a lab coat. Then another. One by one, dozens of attendees rose to their feet in silent support. No shouting, no threats. Just truth made visible. The video went viral within 14 hours. A still image of Leila standing beneath the banner, head held high. Captioned simply, "The daughter they never named." It made the front page of The Guardian, Stat News, and The Atlantic's op-ed column. It trended on X under Fa Bennett Ward, fair race daughter for medical legacy myth, but the backlash came too. Comment sections exploded. "So now we're canceling people after they're dead. She should be proud of her dad's achievements." Sounds like a bitter woman trying to be relevant. Leila didn't flinch. She simply reposted the banner photo with one sentence. "I didn't ask to be remembered. I just refused to be forgotten." 3 days later, the foundation announced they were suspending the name of the award pending review. Delilah sat on the porch that morning, holding her teacup like it was made of glass. "It's not a win," she said quietly, "but it's something." Madeline was already writing the next press release. But Lila, she was quiet. More quiet than usual. Until that afternoon when Delilah's phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. She picked up. "This is Delilah." Silence. Then a man's voice, old, careful, hoarse. "You don't know me. My name is Harold Bennett." "Thomas was my older brother." Delilah froze. The porch around her seemed to still. "He never talked about you," she replied, cautious. Harold chuckled bitterly. "I'm not surprised. He stopped talking to me in 1988, after I confronted him about a situation involving a student. I didn't know her name. I didn't know yours either. Until now." He paused. Delilah waited. "I watched the documentary last month. Then I saw what your daughter did at the award ceremony. And I thought, it's time someone from this family said something." Delilah's hand shook slightly as she brought the phone closer. "What are you saying, mister?" Another pause. Then, "I have letters. From Thomas. Letters he never sent. One of them, he wrote to your daughter. I think you should see them. That evening, Delilah told Leela everything, and for the first time in weeks, Leela looked uncertain. If he never meant me to read them, do I still have the right? Delilah held her gaze. He had the chance to speak. He chose silence. Now you get to choose. Harold lived in a modest cabin on the edge of rural Maine. It took 5 hours and 2 bathroom stops to get there. The porch was covered in leaves. The steps creaked. Inside smelled like old books and pine oil. Harold was waiting with tea already steeped. He looked nothing like Thomas. His eyes were kind. He handed Delilah a wooden box. No lock. Just a sliding top. Inside letters. Some yellowed, some barely a few years old, each in Thomas's meticulous script. Stacked in order, the first dated 1993, the year Leela was born, the last June 2021. 6 months before he died, there were 17 letters. None of them sent. The first few were stiff. Dear Delilah. Dear mistake. Leela read that one out loud, then stopped. Her hands trembled, but she kept reading. Letter Haint 60. I heard she was born. I saw her from the back of the auditorium once. She had my ears. Letter Fay Levinson. There is no easy way to admit this. I made her disappear on paper because I couldn't handle what her presence meant for who I thought I was. Letter Fin 15. Sometimes I imagine she's not real. But then I see a girl on the subway with hair like hers and wonder if she hums the way Delilah used to when nervous. Then came Letterpin 17. Delilah opened it herself. She didn't read it out loud, just stared. Her face didn't move. Then suddenly, she stood up, walked out the front door, closed it gently behind her. Leela looked confused. So did Madeline. Harold offered no explanation, but Delilah didn't come back for 20 minutes. When she did, her hands were clenched. She didn't cry. She only said, that letter was addressed to me. And it started with, I never loved you the way I pretended. Silence. No one spoke. Harold looked down. Leela finally said, do you want me to burn it? Delilah shook her head. No. I want to publish it. All of them. Every cowardly, too, late word. So no one ever paints him as a saint again. That night, they scanned every letter, uploaded them to the archive site for their memoir. Titled the folder, Words He Never Had the Courage to Say. The invitation came via email. Subject, Keynote Request, Ethics in Medical Research. Rewriting the Record, the 2025 International Bioethics Forum. 500 attendees. Live broadcast, dozens of sponsors, including 3 that once funded the Bennett Foundation. Delilah hesitated, but Leela didn't. I'll go, she said. But I won't go as his daughter. I'll go as the woman he tried to forget, and the world tried to ignore. The auditorium was cold. Stage lights harsh, but Leela stood still, holding only one sheet of paper. She didn't bring slides, no graphs, no photos, just a voice. You all know the name Thomas Bennett. Some of you funded his work. Some of you learned from his textbooks. But very few of you ever asked, who he erased to keep his legacy clean. She paused. No one moved. I was not in the footnotes. I was not in the wills. I was in the silence between the accolades. She unfolded the paper. The final letter. She read it out loud. To my daughter, I watched you grow from a distance, like one watches a wildfire from behind glass. Beautiful. Dangerous. Proof that something I tried to contain could not be. I was afraid of what your presence meant. I realize now I should have been afraid of what my absence would do. TRB. Then she looked up. I did not come here to redeem him. I came here to reclaim myself. I am Leela Bennett, not because I want to carry his name, but because I want the next forgotten child to know. You can still write the ending. A silence. Then applause. Not thunderous, but long that night, she changed her email signature. Leela Bennett, she'd heard advocate, author, archivist of unwritten histories. The legacy was no longer his. It was hers. We don't always get to choose our names. Sometimes they come with betrayal, silence, or shame. But claiming a name isn't about honoring the past. It's about declaring who you are, in spite of it. Even a broken legacy can become a bridge if you walk across it with truth. It came in a manila envelope. No return address. Just Leela's name, handwritten, inside a single invitation card. Heavy paper, embossed edges, and 3 words typed in the center, let's talk. Celia? Delilah was in the kitchen when Leela opened it. The sound of the kettle boiling filled the silence. Leela didn't speak for a long time. When she did, her voice was to meet. Delilah froze. She didn't ask who she was. She knew. Celia. Leela's biological mother. The woman who had left her at the ER doors with a note pinned to her baby blanket. I can't raise her. I hope someone else can. Leela had kept that note, folded in plastic. Never read it out loud, never asked about her. Until now, Madeline read the card, then looked up sharply. What does she want? Leela shrugged. I don't know, but she invited me to a panel. A family healing summit. She's one of the speakers. Delilah leaned against the sink, slowly stirring her tea. Her hand trembled just once. Leela noticed. You don't have to come. Delilah looked up. I won't stop you. But I need to ask, what are you hoping to find? Leela didn't answer right away. Then, maybe I just want to hear her say it. That she left. That it wasn't my fault. Or maybe I want to know what kind of woman walks away from a child and thinks a panel makes up for it. That night, Leela stared at the RSVP card. There was no deadline, no pressure. But something inside her felt unfinished. A week later, she bought a plane ticket to Portland. And Delilah, though she said nothing, left a scarf folded on Leela's suitcase. The one she wore when Leela first arrived at her doorstep all those years ago. All glass panels and soft carpets. Branded lanyards. Wellness snacks, soft jazz. Leela hated it. Everything felt curated, polished. As if healing could be scheduled. Her name wasn't on the speaker list, but Celia's was. CLO ran our advocate, survivor, birth mother voice. That last part stung. Leela sat in the back row, alone. The room filled slowly, mostly women, mostly older, some crying already. Then the host stepped up. Our next guest is someone who made the hardest choice a mother can make, and has spent the last 25 years turning that pain into purpose. Celia walked on stage. She looked younger than Delilah. Blonde hair tucked into a low bun, minimal makeup, all soft neutrals and controlled posture. Her voice was smooth, practiced. I was 19. I had nothing but a backpack and a bus pass. And I was pregnant. People nodded. Leela didn't. When I gave birth, I thought the pain would stop. It didn't. I left her at the hospital because I truly believed someone else could do better. And now, 25 years later, I live every day hoping she knows I never stopped loving her. Applause. Even a few sniffles. Leela sat perfectly still. No tears, no notes. Just a single question in her head. Did she come here to heal? Or to be forgiven in public? After the panel, Leela approached the green room. Security stopped her, until Celia spotted her and waved her through. Their eyes locked for the first time. Up close, Celia looked both older and younger than Leela expected. Her eyes scanned Leela's face, then lingered at her mouth, her chin. You look like my grandmother, she whispered. Leela didn't smile. You don't look like anyone I ever needed. Silence. Then Celia reached into her purse and handed over a bracelet, faded pink, plastic beads. I made this. When I was pregnant. Leela held it like evidence in court. Why now? Celia's eyes filled. Because I saw you, that speech. That name. And I thought, maybe she's strong enough now to hear me. Leela's voice was cold. You left me. That's not bravery. That's abandonment. Celia nodded. I know. Leela stared at the bracelet again, then placed it gently on the table. Next time you speak on a panel, tell both versions of the story. Then she walked away. The hotel hallway smelled like lemons and new carpet. Leela's keycard didn't work the first time. She tried again. Click. The door opened to a dark room. Delilah was sitting by the window, knitting something in a deep green wool. She didn't look up right away, just said, There's tea in the pot. Leela stepped inside, quietly shut the door, took off her coat, dropped her purse, and sat. For a full minute, neither spoke. Only the soft clack of needles. Then Leela finally whispered. She gave me a bracelet. From when she was pregnant. Delilah didn't flinch. Did you keep it? No. More silence. Then Leela said, She said she loved me the whole time. Said she watched my speeches. And that she thought I was strong enough now. Delilah placed her knitting down. Folded her hands in her lap. Then looked at Leela and said, simply, You needed the truth. Not the Paula's eyes welled up. But she didn't cry. She told her version on stage. People clapped. They always clap. Delilah smiled, faintly. Because it's easier than asking questions. Then, for the first time in days, Leela laughed. A short, bitter chuckle. I'm tired. Tired of everyone needing to feel good about the damage they've done. Delilah reached across the small table. Took Leela's hand in hers. You don't owe anyone healing. Not unless you want it. Outside, it started to rain, just soft enough to blur the skyline. Inside, they sat. Two women bound not by blood, but by choice. And in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. She may have been your beginning, but I chose to be your middle. And I'm staying till your end. The gala was everything Leela expected. Too much glass, too much perfume, too many people pretending to be moved. She stood near the back, holding a glass of sparkling water. Delilah had stayed in the room. Said her shoes didn't fit the carpet. A woman in a navy dress approached. Badge said, Maya Colton. NBC News National Features. She smiled wide. We're doing a segment on intergenerational healing. And Celia suggested you'd be the perfect co-interview. Leela blinked. Excuse me. Celia appeared from behind a column, wearing ivory silk. Her voice was smooth as always. They're airing it next week. Families who found their way back. It would mean so much to speak together. Leela's mouth tightened. So you can say you made peace with your past. Celia hesitated. So we can show that healing is possible. Leela handed her the glass. Not gently. You don't get to pitch me like a project. I'm not your PR arc. Maya raised her hands. It doesn't have to be polished. Raw is good. Ratings love raw. That was it. Leela turned to Celia. Did you ever once think about how this feels for me? Or did you just see an opportunity to look redeemed? Celia's face fell. I just wanted a moment where we weren't on opposite sides of the story. Leela stared her down, then stopped trying to tell mine. She walked away. Outside, the air was cooler, cleaner. Leela dialed Delilah. She wanted me to do a joint interview. For national TV. Delilah didn't sound surprised. Of course she did. I said no. Good. That night, Leela wrote something new. Not a speech, not a caption, but a letter to herself. You are not the supporting character in anyone's redemption story. You are the author. Write like it. Leela published the piece on a Sunday. Medium, LinkedIn, Instagram. No hashtags. Just a simple title. The mother who left me wants a microphone. I want a mirror. It went viral by Tuesday. Shared over 400,000 times. Translated into 6 languages. Messages poured in. Thank you for saying what I never could. I was adopted. This broke me and healed me all at once. You're not alone, and neither am I. Celia never responded publicly. No denial. No press release. Not even a comment. She simply disappeared from the panels. One by one, her upcoming appearances were canceled. Quietly. Delilah watched it unfold from the garden. She didn't say much, just watered the lilies and murmured. Truth blooms louder than performance. A week later, Leela received a letter. Handwritten, no return address. Just one sentence. I thought I wanted the spotlight. But maybe all I needed was the reflection. See, Leela didn't frame it, didn't reply. She folded it neatly, slid it into a box marked unfinished stories, and left it there. Then she got back to work. A new program was launching, one that gave young women who aged out of foster care free access to mental health counseling and publishing workshops. She named it Claim the Page. And on the mural in the Welcome Center, in gold paint, it read, You are not what they did to you. You are what you decide to write next. Some people will only come back to you when they think your story can save their image. But your truth is not their costume. You do not owe anyone your voice, especially the ones who once silenced it. Tell your story anyway. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove you were always right to survive. It was a rainy Tuesday. Leela was in the foundation office, sorting logistics for an upcoming grant when the receptionist buzzed her. There's a man here asking for you. Says it's personal. Says he's family. Leela paused. What's his name? He says, Simon Renner. Celia's last name. Leela stood so fast her chair screeched. In the lobby stood a man in his early 30s, tall, calm, holding a weathered brown package. His voice was low, polite. I didn't know how else to find you. I'm not here to cause trouble. Leela crossed her arms. Start with the truth. Simon took a breath. I'm Celia's son. Born 8 years after you, she raised me. The words hit like cold water. Leela blinked. She kept you. He nodded. Different father. Different life. I didn't even know about you until 2 months ago. She left this after she passed. Said I could decide whether or not to deliver it. He handed her the package. No return address. Just her full name written in Celia's elegant cursive, Delilah Hope Bennett. She died, Leela whispered. Simon nodded again. Lung cancer. She didn't tell many people. Leela sat down. Felt the weight of the package on her lap. Heavier than it looked. She stared at it. Why now? Because if someone had hidden me my whole life, I'd want to know. And because I think you deserve to read it without the cameras. Without the panels. Just daughter to mother. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she looked up. Did she love you? Simon's face cracked. Just a little. I think so. But after what I've heard, I'm not sure I know what her love meant. Silence. Rain tapping against the window. Then Leela stood and extended a hand. I'm not ready to open this. But you can stay for coffee. Simon shook her hand. That's all I hoped for. Leela waited until midnight. Simon was gone. Delilah was asleep. The world was quiet. She opened the box alone inside. A thick notebook with a cracked maroon cover, a small stack of photographs, 2 sealed letters. On the first page of the notebook was, "To the child I failed. If you're reading this, it means I'm finally quiet enough to let you speak. Celia." The journal started in 1999, a year after Leela was born, a year after she was left behind. I see her face in every sleeping baby. I hear her name in every argument with myself. I call her Delilah in my dreams. I know that's not her name. Leela's throat tightened. She flipped through the pages. When Simon was born, I told myself I could do better. But I wasn't a better woman. Just a more fearful one. I didn't keep him because I was ready. I kept him because I was terrified of being haunted again. Sometimes I punished him for the pain I couldn't undo. When he cried, I hurt her. When he smiled, I felt unworthy. Leela read on. There were entries for birthdays she never had, mentions of the court system, therapy sessions Celia never attended, and in one entry, the woman who raised her Delilah wrote me once. A simple note, if you ever try to come back, don't. She's finally laughing now. Leela blinked, her chest hollowed. She kept that from me, she whispered. Delilah never told me she'd done that. She pulled out the photographs. One was of baby Simon in Celia's arms. A Polaroid of a young Celia sitting alone at a bus station, pregnant, crying, clutching a pink beaded bracelet. The 2 letters, one addressed to Leela, one to Simon. She didn't open hers yet. Not tonight. Instead, she copied one single page from the journal and pinned it on her wall. I lived in the echo of a daughter's name I never got to learn. And even as I held my son, I mourned the absence I created. It was just after sunrise. Delilah was in the kitchen frying eggs, humming something from the 60s. Leela stood in the doorway silent, until she said, "You wrote her." Delilah paused, spatula in hand. "You opened the journal." Leela stepped forward. "You told her never to come back." The silence was louder than any reply. Delilah turned off the stove, laid the spatula down. "I did. Why?" Delilah looked her straight in the eye. "Because she left you once, and I knew if she came back, she'd leave you again." Leela's voice trembled but didn't break. "You said you saved me." "I did. But from who, Delilah? From her? Or from the part of me that needed her?" Delilah's hands shook. She took a breath. "I was 57, alone, and then there was you. A baby someone else walked away from. I wasn't just trying to protect you. I was trying to protect us." Leela dropped the envelope on the table. "Celia's sealed letter." She tried, in her way. "And maybe I'll never forgive her. But I needed that choice. You took it from me." Delilah sat down. A full minute passed. Then she whispered, "I was afraid that if she came back, you'd choose her." Leela's eyes filled, but still didn't spill. "I didn't need a perfect mother. I needed a mother brave enough to let me see all the mess." She picked up her coat. "You once said you'd stay until my end. Don't leave now. But don't lie anymore." Delilah nodded quietly. "I'll stay. And I'll be quiet, so you can speak." That night, Leela texted Simon, "You should read your letter. When you're ready, I'll read mine." They met at a park bench. New Simon held his envelope. Leela held hers. No words, just quiet wind. Leela opened hers first. Inside, a 3-page letter. Handwritten. Dated 2 months before Celia died. "Delilah, I don't know what version of me you remember. But I remember a girl who loved ballet, who hummed in her sleep, who deserved more than a mother who flinched at her own shadow." Leela's hands trembled. "I told myself the system would treat you better than I could. But really, I was afraid of ruining you like I ruined myself. Simon didn't fix me. He just gave me someone new to disappoint more slowly. I kept your photo, the one they gave me at intake. I used to imagine your voice, just to fall asleep." Leela blinked. "Hard. This isn't closure. It's confession." Simon nodded. "Mine too." He opened his. Hers was shorter. 1 page. Someone, I wanted you to know that I tried. I tried to be better for you. But better doesn't always mean good. You will hear stories of a woman who left her first child. But know this, I carried her in every smile I gave you. I loved you both. Just not well enough. Simon folded the page slowly. She never told me about you. And now I wonder what else she didn't tell me. Leela stared ahead. Maybe love isn't enough. Not if it stays silent. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out something wrapped in a velvet cloth. I found this in her jewelry box. He unwrapped it. It was a tiny pink bracelet. Beads faded. Elastic stretched. Delilah, Simon whispered. She kept it. Leela exhaled. She didn't leave empty-handed. She left quietly. They sat for a while longer. Then Simon said, "Do you ever feel like neither of us was really hers?" Leela looked up. "I feel like we both were. Just never at the same time." The Center for Personal History sat inside an old brick schoolhouse. No logo, no glamour. Just a single plaque by the door. "If you don't tell the story, someone else will." Leela walked in carrying a small box. Inside, Celia's journal, 2 letters, the pink bracelet, a photo of Leela as a baby, a photo of Simon in Celia's arms, the archivist. A woman with silver braids and soft eyes greeted her. "First time donating." "First time doing this without anger," Leela replied. They sat at a recording booth. "Do you want to leave a message attached to the archive?" Leela thought. Then she pressed record. Her name was Celia Renner. She was a mother, and she wasn't ready. She left, then she raised another child, but in both stories love was quiet, fear was loud, and silence wrote most of the pages. "I am her daughter. I'm not here to redeem her. I'm here to record her, so no one else has to wonder who they came from, or who they're allowed to become." Click. Rako and Sivid. The archivist nodded. "We'll keep her here." "All of her?" "Thank you," Leela said. "No," the woman replied. "Thank you for not keeping her a secret. Back outside." Leela stood under the oak tree. She texted Simon, "It's done. She won't be forgotten. But she won't speak for me anymore, either." Later that night, she returned home. Delilah left a note on the table. "Sup's in the fridge. You were always mine, even when I didn't know how to say it right." Leela smiled faintly. She didn't reply. She just sat in the quiet and wrote a new page in her journal. "I come from women who broke things. I'll be the one who builds. Forgiveness is not always the goal. Sometimes it's enough to simply refuse to forget. Because remembering, clearly, honestly, painfully, is how we take our power back. You don't need to rewrite their story. You just need to write yours, louder." Leela returned to the foundation 3 weeks after submitting Celia's archive. Her desk was where she left it. Her inbox was not 89 unread messages, 12 flagged cases, 3 marked urgent, but 1 file sat physically on her desk, a manila folder. Unmarked except for a sticky note, "Look familiar." Gwen inside, a case summary. Name Aiden Bennett, age 16, current placement. Temporary group home, 4th in 2 years, noti, quiet, resistant to therapy, doesn't trust male staff, repeated request to stop using that name. Leela blinked. "Bennett." She flipped the page, Auden's intake photo. Light brown skin, sharp eyes, shoulders hunched like a boy who stopped hoping anyone would stay. Then the next page, a scanned letter. Folded, crumpled, old, handwritten. "To my son, if you ever see the name Michael Bennett again, don't believe what they say. The truth is not on paper, it's buried with me." When her Leela sat back, her hands tingled. "Gwen." "Michael." She turned to her computer. Searched foundation records. Nothing on Gwen as a client, but under donor history, there she was. Gwen Alcott, philanthropist volunteer. Former partner of Michael Bennett. Leela's stomach turned. She opened Gwen's donor profile. At the bottom, last known contact 2006. No activity since. She clicked on staff notes. There was only one entry. Sensitive history with founder. "Do not contact without approval. Michael B." Leela whispered to herself. "You built a foundation for lost children and left one behind." She looked at Aiden's photo again. Same tired eyes, same name. Same silence she once carried. The group home was 2 towns over. Small brick building, metal fence painted baby blue. Someone had planted tulips. They were dying. Leela checked in, flashed her badge, and asked for Aiden. The staff nodded toward the backyard. "He's where he always is. Hates the inside." Leela stepped outside. There he was, sitting under a bent basketball hoop, hood up. She approached slowly. "Aiden?" He didn't look up. "Don't call me that." She stopped. Measured her words. What should I call you? Pause. Just don't use that last name. Alila sat on the bench nearby. Silence stretched like fog. Then she spoke. My last name used to be Bennett too. I didn't ask for it. Didn't want it either. His head turned just slightly. Still no eye contact. You're one of them. I work for the foundation. But I'm not here as staff. So what are you here for? Leela swallowed. To ask if you ever knew your mother. That got his attention. He turned, face guarded, lips pressed flat. You mean Gwen? Yes! She's dead. I know. Pause. She left me a letter. Said not to trust anyone named Bennett. Leela nodded. She might have been right. So why are you here? Because she also mentioned Michael. And I think he may have been my father. Iden stood. You think we're related? I don't know. But I know this. People who lie usually leave paper trails. And people who tell the truth leave silence. He looked at her for the first time. Do you want the truth? I want your truth, the one no one else is writing down. He hesitated. Then quietly, the only thing I know about my mom is that she sang. Even when everything else hurt, she sang. Lila sat back. In her mind, she saw Delilah humming in the kitchen, a mother trying to keep something alive. You're not the only one who remembers a mother that way, she said. 2 days later, Aiden showed up at the foundation. He didn't knock, didn't ask. He just walked in and said, let's find out if he's mine too. Leela nodded. They headed to archives. The room smelled like old paper and damp promises. Rows of metal cabinets, locked drawers, thick binders labeled with numbers and acronyms. Leela typed into the digital catalog. Gwen Alcott, maternal files, 2006-2007 one result. Restricted level 3 executive access only. She froze. This shouldn't be restricted. Gwen was never listed as staff. Iden crossed his arms. Wes, your dad had pull. Leela tried her admin key. Access denied. She called IT. When need override on a level 3 file. Ooze requesting. Lila Wexler, Bennett. Pause. Approved. She glanced at Iden. That last name just got us in. Don't get used to it, he muttered. Inside the drawer, one folder. Labeled Alcott, Jeet Support File, 2007. They opened it. Inside, hospital record birth of Aiden. March 2007 custody waiver signed by Gwen, application for temporary housing, financial stipend approval. Leela held up the last page. Monthly support, 12 months. Renewable upon discretion of private donor. She flipped it over. At the bottom, signed MB, Michael Bennett. She whispered. He knew. He paid. Iden grabbed the paper. His hand shook. He paid to keep me out of his life. Alila shook her head. Or to keep your mother afloat. Same thing. She flipped through the rest of the folder. Tucked in the back, a post-it note. Do not contact again. Gwen has signed NDA. Stipend is conditional on silence. Initialed MB. Iden dropped into the metal chair. I'm not a mistake. I was a transaction. Leela sat beside him. So was I. Yeah, but at least you were recorded. I was hidden. The room was quiet. Then Leela asked, do you want to do a DNA test? Why? I already know what it'll say. So do I. But sometimes it's not about answers. It's about proof. That the DNA test was submitted. 2 weeks to wait. But the answer came sooner. Not by email, but through the foundation front desk. A woman in her early 50s. Black leather jacket. Gray streaked hair. Eyes too tired to be angry anymore. I'm looking for Leela Wexler. I think you knew my sister. Gwen Alcott. Lila met her in the atrium. Iden stood nearby, alert but silent. The woman sat down, held a worn envelope. My name's Maureen. Gwen was my older sister. We didn't talk much after she left town. But she sent me these letters. Over years, she handed them to Leela. 5 letters, all unopened, postmarked from different towns. All addressed, to be opened if anything ever happens to me, or if someone asks about Iden. Leela and Iden sat on the foundation bench side by side. They read in silence. The 3rd letter changed everything. I loved Michael. But I couldn't give him a son he could raise. He wanted to. He really did. But I made the deal. I signed the waiver. Because I knew being a Bennett came with too many expectations. I was scared Iden would be eaten by the name like Michael was. Iden clenched his jaw. She made that choice. Leela nodded slowly. To protect you. Or control you. Is there a difference? Not always. Maureen added, quietly. Michael came to see Iden once. When he was 2. Gwen pretended he was a social worker. I only knew because she cried for days after. Leela looked at Iden. She didn't want to erase him. She wanted to keep him distant. Same result. Maureen stood. I don't know if this helps, but Gwen wasn't cruel. She was afraid. All her life. She placed a hand on Aiden's shoulder. So don't become what scared her. Become what she didn't know how to be. Then she left. Leela folded the letters. Aiden whispered. He tried. Yeah. So maybe I wasn't just left behind. Maybe. Leela said. You were loved in a broken way. The DNA result arrived on a Monday morning. Positive match. Leela read it once, then deleted the email. Aiden never asked. Neither of them needed to say it out loud. That Friday, Leela was invited to speak at a youth forum. The theme, belonging after abandonment. She almost declined. Then Aiden said, You keep telling me to stop hiding. Maybe it's your turn. The hall was small, 50 seats, mostly teenagers from shelters, foster homes, detention transitions. Leela stood behind the podium, heart racing, hands cold. Aiden sat in the front row. She told her story, the letters, the silence, the name she inherited before she knew what it meant. Then she paused and pointed gently toward Aiden. And this is my brother, not because of blood, but because we both survived being rewritten. We weren't the story people wanted, so we became the story people needed. The room went still. Then someone clapped. Then more. Then everyone. Afterward, Aiden stayed quiet until they got outside. Then he said, You didn't have to say that. I know, but you did. He nodded. Then added, I think, she would have liked hearing it. That night, Aiden changed his email signature. Removed Aiden X. He didn't use Bennett. But he didn't hide anymore either. Just one line, son of Gwen, brother of Leela. We can't choose our blood, but we can choose who we call family. There are relationships that are born in silence, but grow with understanding. And sometimes, the most healing thing isn't knowing who your father is. It's finding someone who was abandoned and surviving together. It started on a Sunday night. Leela was brushing her teeth when her phone buzzed. Elaine's voice came through, shaky. Turn on Channel 5, now. She switched it on. There, on national TV, sat a woman in her mid-60s, steel, gray curls, red lipstick, eyes like a courtroom. Lower third Kyron Reedy, EXLUC. Former Foundation executive breaks 20-year silence. The host leaned in. So Ms. Delphine, you're saying, Michael Bennett knew about the abuse. He didn't just know, she said calmly. He protected the abuser. And he buried the report I submitted. Leela dropped the toothbrush. Elaine whispered through the phone. Her name is Claudia Delphine. She worked with us for 12 years. She disappeared after 2006. Disappeared, or was silenced. Leela asked. Elaine didn't answer. On screen, Claudia continued. Michael had charisma. But he also had enemies. Not because he did bad things, but because he allowed bad things in exchange for loyalty. The host leaned forward. Are you saying he knowingly protected abusers in the Foundation? Not many, but enough. And only the ones that helped keep the public image clean. Leela's mind spun. The Foundation, her foundation, was being dissected live on air, and Michael's name wasn't being honored. It was being unraveled. The next day, the building was chaos. Emails flooded in. Donors paused funding. Parents called, asking if their children were safe. Leela stood in the boardroom, Elaine beside her. She looked older overnight. Voice tight. You need to issue a statement, someone said. You're the face now, said another. Leela stood up. I will. But not today? Why not? The comms director asked. Leela looked directly at Elaine. Because I need to know what Elaine isn't telling us first. Silence fell. Elaine didn't flinch. She only said, then meet me tonight. No press. No staff. Just you and me. Elaine's house smelled like cinnamon tea and paper files. Same kitchen. Same tile cracks by the stove. But this time, Leela noticed the photos missing from the fridge. All the ones of her and Michael. Elaine poured tea but didn't drink. She placed a single manila folder between them. You came for answers. But you won't like them. Try me. Elaine opened the folder. Inside, a printed report. Dated August 14, 2006. Subject. Staff misconduct allegation, level 2. Name redacted. Submitted by Claudia Delphine. Status. Closed without disciplinary action. Leela flipped pages. A paragraph was underlined. Suspected grooming behavior toward minors. Recurring overnight shifts with no co-supervisor present. Refusal to install cameras in East Wing. She looked up. Michael closed this. He called it insufficient evidence. Elaine looked away. But the real reason was deeper. What was it? Elaine exhaled, slow and brittle. The accused was Michael's oldest friend. They co-founded the first shelter together. If the story got out, it would have destroyed the foundation before it ever grew. Leela stood. So he chose silence. No, he chose delay. Elaine slid another note across the table. He asked me to watch him. Said don't report anything, but if you see one more thing, I'll burn it all down myself. Leela scoffed. And did you see more? Elaine was quiet, too quiet. Then a whisper. Yes. Leela felt something snap in her chest. Then why didn't you burn it down? Elaine looked her straight in the eye. Because he died 2 weeks later. Silence stretched. Leela sat slowly, the timeline unraveled in her head. August 2006 misconduct report. September 2006 foundation gala. October 2006 Michael's fatal car crash. Elaine poured more tea. Still didn't drink. He didn't cover it up forever. He just never got the chance to do the right thing. Leela shook her head. That's not justice. That's convenience dressed as regret. Elaine didn't argue. She only said, so now it's yours to fix. The file, the story, and whatever's left of his legacy. Leela looked down at the report again. One sentence stood out. The child involved was transferred to a different facility. Name not recorded. She stared at the paper like it could bleed. Do we know who the kid was? Elaine hesitated. I do. Elaine wrote down an address. He goes by Julian now. Changed his last name. He agreed to speak to you once. Leela drove 3 hours to the coastal town. Small streets, windy trees, a coffee shop with no name. Julian sat near the window. Beard, broad shoulders, but eyes that didn't rest. He spoke first. You're his daughter. Yes. And hers. Also yes. That's funny. Because I used to wonder what it would be like to have either. Leela sat. I'm not here to apologize. I'm here to understand. Good, Julian said. Because no apology would work. He sipped his coffee. I was 14. My file said I was hard to place, too quiet, too moody. You know what that really meant? What? Easy target. Leela flinched. Julian continued. He didn't touch me, not the way you think. But he knew I had no one, so he made himself the only someone. He stared out the window. One night he said I could sleep in his office. That'd feel safer. He told me secrets. Personal things. Made me feel special. Leela asked, and Michael, hey, knew. He saw us walking late one night. I think he wanted to believe it was just mentorship. Was it? Julian laughed without smiling. Is it ever? Leela looked down. I want to tell your story. Publicly. But only if you say yes. Julian leaned in. Tell it wrong, and you'll make him a monster. Tell it right, and you'll make the world ask why no one stopped it. Leela nodded. So what do you want? Julian sat back. Nothing. Nothing. I've made peace with my past. But if telling it helps another kid smell danger sooner, then fine. Just don't make me a headline. I'm not a victim. I'm a warning. He stood, dropped a few dollars on the table. You have a platform. Use it. Don't protect legacies. Protect kids. Leela watched him walk into the afternoon sun and knew what she had to do next. The foundation's boardroom had never been so full. 12 directors, 1 press consultant, 2 legal observers, and Leela, standing at the head of the table with trembling fingers. Elaine sat silently at the far end. She hadn't said a word since Leela returned from seeing Julian. Leela cleared her throat. I'm here today, not to defend the past, but to release the future. That sounds rehearsed, one board member muttered. It is, Leela said. Because I've played it in my head 100 times. She placed the file on the table. Claudia's original report, Julian's statement, Elaine's handwritten note. Michael Bennett failed to act. He waited too long, and then he died before fixing it. But that doesn't absolve us, or the legacy we now represent. A one member asked, so what's your proposal? Leela inhaled. We'll go public. We release the documents. We invite Julian to speak anonymously. And we remove Michael's name from the mentorship hall. Gasps. Protests. Someone banged a fist. Elaine didn't move. Then, quietly, the head of records, an older woman named Marcia, spoke. There's just something you need to see first. She opened her bag, pulled out a yellowed envelope. I found it in the wrong drawer. It was never logged. Dated 2 weeks before the crash. She passed it to Leela. Front read. To be opened only by my daughter. Back was signed, MB. Leela's hands shook. She opened it. Inside, Lila, if you're reading this, then I never made it back from that trip. I've made mistakes. Some small. Some so large they swallowed the good things I tried to build. There is one in particular that haunts me, and you'll find it in a file dated August 14, 2006. I saw it. I knew. And I paused. I told myself I'd handle it quietly, with care. But care delayed becomes complicity. You are not me. You are better. If it is still there, I trust you to do what I couldn't. Burn the roots, even if I planted them. Dad. The room fell into absolute silence. Leela folded the letter, spoke softly. He didn't get to do the right thing, but he knew what the right thing was. And now, he's given us permission to do it. Elaine looked down, her eyes glistening. Then burn it, Leela. Burn it all. The press conference was standing room only. Every major outlet had shown up cameras, reporters. Protesters outside the building. Leela stood behind the podium, wearing a plain gray suit, no makeup, hair tied back like her younger self. She took a breath, looked at the sea of microphones, then began, I stand before you not as the director of the Bennett Foundation, but as the daughter of a man who made irreversible mistakes. Flashes. Murmurs, she continued. In 2006, an incident occurred within our organization. A trusted staff member manipulated a vulnerable child. That incident was documented, but never acted upon. The man who received that report was my father, Michael Bennett. And he did not act. A reporter shouted, Are you saying Michael Bennett enabled abuse? Leela didn't flinch. I'm saying he froze when he should have moved, and a child paid the price. She looked down at the statement she had written, then slowly folded it, looked back at the room. But I'm also saying this. Silence doesn't erase a legacy, but truth can rebuild it. That child, now a grown man, gave us permission to speak today, and in doing so, reminded us that the real legacy of a foundation is not in the founder's name, but in the safety of those it protects. Behind her, a team unveiled a new plaque. It no longer read, Michael Bennett Mentorship Hall. Instead, room 317 in honor of every child who survived. Leela turned back to the cameras. This is no longer about a man, or his reputation. This is about making sure that no child ever has to heal from our silence again. From today forward, our foundation's mission is reborn, rooted not in legacy, but in accountability. Applause, some tearful, some stunned, and somewhere in the back of the room, Julian, now in a hood and sunglasses, nodded once, then slipped away. Elaine stood in the shadows off stage, hands clasped, and for the first time in years, she whispered not with guilt, but with peace. You did it, Leela. Is justice delayed as pain prolonged? But truth, even when spoken late, still has the power to heal. Sometimes, honoring the past means letting go of the names and protecting the people. My name is Leela Bennett. I used to believe I was the daughter of a savior. Then, I thought I was the orphan of a coward. But now I'm just a woman standing in the ruins of half-truths, trying to piece together what was real. This isn't a story someone told me. This is a story I pulled out of a forgotten server, buried deep under concrete and silence. This is the story of a folder that never meant for me to find. Exactly 1 week after our press conference, the one that put my family's entire legacy under public scrutiny, I received an anonymous email. No subject line, no attachments, just a block of text. There's one folder Gwen and Michael never meant for you to find. But they never deleted it, and I never had the heart to erase it either. Password. Your birthday reversed. CHCH. It took me a full minute to place the initials. Clark Hennessy. The old IT guy from the Foundation's early days. He used to live in the basement server room. Didn't talk much. Never showed up at the annual fundraisers. Always wore the same worn-out beige vest and smelled faintly of printer ink. He used to call me Little Codebreaker when I was a teenager. He must have known I'd come looking eventually. I waited until late that night, then headed down to the basement archive room. The one nobody but Clark ever really used. The fluorescent lights flickered above me like they were remembering their own secrets. I brought gloves, a portable hard drive, and a steady hand I didn't feel. The old server hummed like a ghost from another era. I plugged into the terminal, typed in my birthday reversed, upload 89/2/1980. The folder appeared instantly. Fliartifo diet row 33 inside were dozens of files. Video logs, scanned letters, text transcripts, WAV audio files, and one text file titled THEDD CO UP ROCK UXed. I opened it. The first line made me sit down. This is the truth of how Gwen and I began, and how we ended. Before you ever knew we existed together. It was Michael's writing, his tone precise but haunted. The entry was dated 2002, just before the official launch of the foundation. He talked about college, about UCLA in the 90s, about a girl with fire in her eyes, who stood on cafeteria tables, yelling about systemic failure, while the rest of the students silently scrolled through their Walkmans. Gwen didn't enter rooms. She overtook them. I fell for her before I even knew her name. They'd met in a youth advocacy program, volunteering at group homes, reviewing case files of children no one else wanted to bother with. Then came Noah. He was 10. Abandoned by 2 foster homes. Sent to a religious reform school in Utah for being too feminine. Michael wanted to follow procedure, file complaints, gather evidence, wait for court approval. Gwen didn't wait. She took Noah and ran. They vanished across state lines. Gwen came back alone 3 weeks later. Michael was furious. She was unapologetic. Their email exchange days later still stings Michael. You're brave, but you're reckless. I can't keep fixing what you ignite. Gwen, you fix paper trails. I save children. They broke up 2 months later, not because they stopped loving each other, but because love wasn't enough when justice meant different things to different hearts. One file was scanned from a hospital record. It shouldn't have been there. It wasn't about a child in the system. It was about Gwen. Patient Gwen Albright, dated July 9, 1999, status in 12 weeks pregnant. My mouth went dry. No way. There was a note scribbled in Gwen's handwriting in the margins. Father not informed. For safety and privacy reasons, we'll raise the child alone. I scrolled back to the timeline. That was shortly after she disappeared with Noah. After she and Michael ended. So Michael never knew. Or he did, and just never told me. I went back to Michael's journal and scrolled to the last few entries. I tried to find her. Heard whispers she moved east. I sent 1 letter. Never got a reply. She made her choice. I made mine. I just hope wherever she is, she's safe. No anger. No bitterness, just resignation and loss. I whispered to the screen. Didn't you? The final file in the folder was audio. A WAV file labeled simply for J. Gwen's voice. Young, clear, vulnerable in a way I'd never heard before. Joshua, I gave you a name your father never knew. Not because I didn't love him, but because I was afraid of what loving him could cost you. If you ever wonder why there are no pictures of your dad, it's because sometimes love means staying away. I didn't even realize I was crying, not for myself, but for the boy in that recording, for the love buried in silence. Back in the Foundation's internal database, I typed in Joshua Albright. No hits. But when I just searched for Joshua, birth year 2001 result appeared. Joshua Dub admitted to a Foundation-run youth program in 2015. Discharged 6 months later. The note said, male, approx 15, highly intelligent, emotionally guarded. Expressed distrust in authority. Repeated, I don't belong here. I was never supposed to be here. Left voluntarily. No follow-up. I clicked on the thumbnail. My breath caught. He had Gwen's sharp eyes. And Michael's jaw. He had been here. Under our roof. 15 years old. No one ever told me, not Gwen, not Michael. I remembered once years ago, asking Gwen if she ever thought about giving me a sibling. You don't need a sibling to be whole, Leela, she had said, brushing my hair behind my ear. You just need to know who you are. Now I know what she meant. She wasn't keeping me from someone. She was protecting both of us from the truth. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. Joshua, my brother, my mother's first child. The son my father never got to meet. And now he was gone again. I printed the photo and held it in my hands. The paper trembled slightly. I wasn't sure if it was the printer still warm, or me. He looked maybe 15 in the picture. Eyes sharp like Gwen's. His mouth was tight like he didn't trust the photographer. His collar was half up, like he'd shrugged off whoever tried to fix it. He looked like someone used to being alone, and angry about it. He looked like someone I should have known, and I hadn't. I thought about the way Gwen would sometimes go quiet during long drives. The way she'd stare out the window. Her thumb brushing the inside of her palm like a ghost was pressing back. I thought about how Michael, in his later years, would stare at old photos and sigh just once, then change the subject. All these silences, all these quiet edits of the past, and in the middle of it all, a boy, Joshua. I said his name out loud. It felt unfamiliar on my tongue, and yet mine. That night I sat in my apartment, the lights off, laptop open, coffee cold. I played the audio file of Gwen again and again. I memorized every pause in her voice. Every little crack. I wanted to reach into that recording and pull her through it, ask her why. But I already knew why. They were both trying to protect him. From each other, from the world, maybe even from me. I opened a new browser tab and typed Joshua W., Pennsylvania. Missing records. Youth shelter. I cross-referenced names, shelters, church-run housing networks. Nothing definitive, a few Joshuas. One arrest record from 2 years ago that might have been him. Petty theft, dismissed, no photo. Another mention in a community board about a quiet teen who used to draw comics and vanished mid-year. But that was it. The trail was cold. I closed the laptop and leaned back. The ceiling looked different now. Like it knew more than I did. Like it had always known. I had a brother. He had lived in the same building as me. He had eaten our food, maybe walked the same hallways, and now he was gone. I picked up the printed photo. On the back, I scribbled one word, brother. I sat like that until morning. A few days later, I stood outside the mailroom with a letter in my hand. It was addressed to someone named Joshua W., with the only address I had the last place the foundation had on file. It was outdated. Probably useless. But it was something. Inside the envelope, I wrote the truth. I told him who I was. What I'd learned, what I hoped he might still want to know. I didn't mail it. Not that day. I stood there, thumb over the seal, wondering if opening this door would mean closing others. If reaching out would hurt more than help. If he was safer not knowing me at all. I slid the letter back into my bag and walked away. Maybe someday. Or maybe he'd find me first. All I knew was this: I wasn't the only one left with questions anymore. And I wasn't the only child they tried to protect by keeping things buried. The day of the summit arrived with too much sunshine. It felt wrong, almost offensive, for the world to look so clean when everything in my chest still felt wrecked. I stood backstage, staring at the long red carpet leading to the podium. There were maybe 100 chairs arranged in neat rows. More behind that. Reporters, advocates, survivors, politicians who wanted to be seen. Elaine gave my hand a squeeze before stepping aside. "You ready?" she whispered. I wasn't. Not really. But the words had already been written. The speech was prepared. My name was printed on the program in black serif font, Leela Bennett, Director, the Gwen Foundation. It felt surreal. Somewhere in the crowd, someone had printed Gwen's face on a tribute banner. Her eyes were soft, brighter than I remembered. I took a breath. The announcer's voice echoed. "And now, please welcome our keynote speaker, Ms. Leela Bennett." I walked out, slow, steady. The microphone buzzed once and cleared. I looked at the crowd. Faces I saw him. Row 5, third from the left. Hoodie up, arms crossed. Joshua. Or someone who could be. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. But I felt it. The stare, that impossible energy that said, "I know you see me." I looked down at my speech. The pages felt suddenly useless. I folded them. And I began to speak. "Before I talk to you about policy, I want to talk about silence." Silence raised me. It was the lullaby of my childhood. It protected me. It lied to me. I thought I was the only one who didn't know the full story. But now I know. Silence is something many of us were handed like an inheritance. I scanned the crowd again. He hadn't moved. He didn't blink. I continued. My mother, Gwen, was a warrior. But warriors carry wounds they never show. And the man I once believed abandoned us, Michael. He carried a truth that love alone couldn't repair. I paused. And then finally, "I have a brother." Gasps. Murmurs. Flashbulbs. I didn't flinch. "I don't know where he is. I don't know if he wants to be found. But I'm saying his name now, publicly, so he knows. I'm not afraid of the truth anymore." The auditorium went quiet, and for the first time, I saw something shift in his posture. A softening. Just for a second. Then he stood and walked out. I kept talking, but my voice felt distant. The rest of the speech blurred behind that moment. I saw him only from behind. Hoodie jeans, shoulders hunched, disappearing through the side aisle. Gone again. Hours later, after the summit had ended, I sat alone at a small table in the courtyard behind the venue. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my bag and pulled out the old photo again, the one with his teenage face. On the back, I'd added a second word beside brother, this time maybe. My phone buzzed again, then stopped. When I finally opened it, there was no voicemail. But there was one message. "You did good, Leela. Maybe I'll let you find me next time. Jay." I smiled, a real one. Not because I had all the answers, but because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't the only one looking. Some families are built on names, others on blood, but the strongest ones are built on truth, even when it comes late, even when it hurts. Silence may keep us safe, but it never lets us heal. Only truth does. It's been 8 months since the summit. 8 months since I stood on that stage and said my brother's name to the world. We haven't spoken again. Not directly. No calls. No meetings. But every month on the 10th, I receive a small, plain envelope. No return address. Inside, there's always one thing: a drawing. The first one was a cartoon of me, standing behind a microphone, my hair in a loose bun, eyes wide. A little speech bubble read, "Oops, I found you." I laughed until I cried. The second drawing was of Gwen, sitting under a tree with a small boy curled beside her, a book open in her lap. Her face was peaceful. The most recent one, it was a sketch of 2 kids, one with curly hair, one with straight, standing in front of a house labeled H. Oma, with a question mark. Underneath it, "Maybe one day." I keep them in a box marked "Letters I Never Mailed." Right beside the first letter I wrote to him. The one I never sent. I still haven't sent it. I don't need to. Somehow we're talking anyway. I've learned something since this all began. Something they don't teach in foundations or write in grants. The truth isn't a clean line. It's a circle. Sometimes jagged, sometimes quiet, but always waiting to be walked, even if it hurts. Gwen used to tell me stories when I couldn't sleep, fairy tales, with brave girls and lost boys and dragons that didn't look like dragons. But she never told me how stories really end. Because she didn't know. Because they don't. We are all still writing our final chapters, every day, with every choice we make. And sometimes the most radical act of love is to tell the truth, even if your voice shakes. If you're holding on to a secret, one you think protects someone, ask yourself, are you shielding them from pain or from growth? Because sometimes, the only thing standing between healing and heartbreak is the courage to speak and to listen. If this story stirred something inside you, don't keep it in. Maybe there's a letter you never sent, a name you've tried to forget, or a silence you've carried for far too long. You're not alone. On Telling Story with me, we believe the most powerful stories are the ones whispered for years before they're finally spoken. So tell yours. In the comments. Like if it made you feel something. Subscribe if you're ready to hear what no one else dares to say. Because around here, we don't just tell stories. We tell the ones that matter.